Welcome. My name is Chris Lynch. Tonight we're starting with a public hearing on the Eastdale Transitions Renovation Project, and I declare this public hearing open.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2016 Eastdale Transitions Renovation Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on September 13th, 2016. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on September 14th, 2016. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. October 13th at the Educational Services Center located at 1725 North Dodge Street, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on September 14th, 2016. Are there any questions from the board?
Will the size of the new facility be as large as the past facility, or will it be slightly smaller?
Okay. Suite 15, 16, and 15A are 37 square feet larger than 15 and 22. And so the spaces that we were using before, it's almost identical space. It'll be reconfigured space. It'll be more user-friendly. We really feel it's a really step in the right direction. But it's, for all practical purposes, the same square footage.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any questions from the public?
Thanks, Brian. I declare this public hearing closed. Welcome to the Iowa City Community School District on Tuesday, September 27th. I'd like to thank those in the audience and those on TV for taking an interest in our district business. I'd like to start tonight by introducing those at the table with me tonight. To my right is Director Lori Rowland, Phil Hemingway, Brian Kersling, Latasha Deloge, Paul Rosler, Chris Liebig, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. Steve is out tonight. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in during community comment. Persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. I did want to just quickly thank our first and second grade students at Grant Wood for sending us some very nice thank you cards. And dear our friends on the ICC SD School Board, thank you for building our new playground at Grant Wood. So there's both a thank you from the first grade and the second grade, so we'll pass those around. Very nice. Thank you to the first and second grade at Grant Wood. And thanks to Longfellow and Wood for the art behind us and around the building tonight. Next on the agenda was an item to appoint a temporary board secretary, but Craig is here tonight, so we don't need that agenda item. And the next item on the agenda is community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You're reminded to give your name, address, and the topic you wish to speak. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. The initial community comment shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. To the extent you're commenting on items not on our posted agenda, the board may ask follow-up questions of speakers, but is prohibited by Iowa open meetings laws from responding to questions from speakers or engaging in substantive discussions regarding non-agenda items. And first up is Leslie and Joe Wegman.
Good evening. My name is Joe Wegman. I'm president of AW Weldon Briscoe Insurance here in Iowa City. And tonight I'd like to read a brief overview of the district's insurance program. In the spring of 2012, 6 Iowa school districts joined a self-funded insurance program for property casualty and workers' compensation coverage. This program, the Iowa Public School Insurance Program, or IPSIP, is governed by a 7-member board consisting of representatives from member districts and administered by Arthur J. Gallagher Risk Management Services. IPSIP provides the insurance pool through a 28E agreement and is registered with the Iowa Secretary of State. The board includes John Thompson of Appleton Parkersburg Schools as chairperson, Kevin Bacon from Southeast Polk Schools as vice chair, and Leslie Finger, Iowa City Schools, as the treasurer. IPSIP has grown to 25 member districts for 2016-17 covering nearly 50,000 students and approximately $1.9 billion of covered property and payrolls of $306 million annually. The programs continues to enhance the coverage to its members, including cyber liability, reduction of property deductibles to $1,000 per occurrence, excess liability limits increased to $20 million per member, excess property limits to $500 million, as well as increased coverage for boiler, flood, earthquake, and pollution. These enhanced coverages have been provided to members with very little increase in premiums due to purchasing benefits from the growing pool and managing risk effectively. Currently, the program costs for property casualty coverage experienced a 3.68% decrease because of this effective management, despite offering higher limits for liability and cyber coverage. The program is subject to annual external audits as well as actuarial services to determine the appropriate reserves to maintain for current and future trending of claims. Subject to these actuarial services, the program has had a positive claim experience and is able to provide the initial surplus return to members for 2012-13 property casualty coverage period. So the next step, I'd like to read this letter that Leslie Finger sent to all the members of IPSIP in the district. As a member of the Iowa Public School Insurance Program, you are receiving a distribution from the pool surplus from the Property and Casualty Program from 2012-13 coverage period in accordance with the program bylaws. This surplus was declared by the Executive Committee at its August 30th, 2016 meeting. The surplus is based upon the actual pool experience and claims paid during the coverage period, combined with actuarially determined estimates for future claims. The surplus policy also includes a provision to set aside pool reserves against future claims. The distribution amount to your district is calculated using the net available for surplus distribution times the proportion of the loss fund contribution made by your district. IPSIP is excited to provide this return of surplus and looks forward to working with your district to provide high-quality insurance programs to protect students, staff, communities of your district. IPSIP is also excited for steady growth and expanded coverages that have been provided to the Iowa schools over the last 4 years and for many years to come. Sincerely, Leslie Finger. So I have a check here to present for $4,284.92, which is the first distribution the program's made. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Could your letter or presentation be entered into the minutes for this meeting?
I'd just like to add, too, that this particular program was an alternative to the safety group that was being provided through ISB and EMC for a number of years. And Iowa City was one of the initial founding schools, this started on July 1 of 2012. And it's been very successful and has grown since that time. We're very pleased with the coverage we get. We're very pleased with the working relationship we have through IPSIP. And I do believe that we're seeing the program mature to the point where it can be an extremely strong competitor to the ISB program, and that having the effect of holding down costs for Iowa schools. And so this district should be very pleased with being one of the founding members and being part of something that's so successful. So, and thank you to Leslie for all the work he puts into this, and in his treasurer, wearing his treasurer hat. So,
Thanks, Joe. Leslie and Greg. Next up is Jesse Witherfell.
Hello. My name is Jessie Witherell, 1241 East Burlington Street in Iowa City, and you probably remember me as the woman who delivered the petition to you guys a couple months ago. I'm not coming based on my own experiences tonight. I can honestly say that my son's supports in special education have been awesome. But I am the co-founder of the Iowa City Autism Community, and I talk to many, many other parents on a daily basis about things that concern them. And so I'm here to represent them tonight, not myself. In regards to the Department of Education report, I appreciate Steve Murley's statement to the Press Citizen about looking into the matter, and I do thank him for that. But I'm here because parents, especially those who aren't able to read the paper, still feel that they've been left disconnected. I understand that there's been a lot done here with the board, and that the list of state recommendations is being complied with, and that's great. However, to those of us who have children who have special needs, we're not able to come to these meetings. And so the majority of our information that we get comes from either newspapers or the media or from each other. And there really needs to be better communication, I think. There was recently a very alarming story in the Gazette regarding the district's lacking of proper documentation and possible misuse of some seclusion rooms. And for some parents who are still recovering from the report, this didn't help our collective unease. Children were put in seclusion rooms for reasons like pouting and getting out of a line, and this is fully reported. Were there corrective actions taken regarding this? Was this something we need to worry about, or is this something that is just a result of poor documentation? And if it's a result of poor documentation, what are we doing to make sure that, you know, there's a story behind this, that there was a real reason for a child being put in a seclusion room? Pouting is not a reason for being put in a seclusion room. According to the Iowa Department of Education rules, these should never be used for minor infractions like pouting, and all parents are to be annually notified of disciplinary policy regarding the use of confinement and restraint. It's in Chapter 103 of the Iowa Department of Education under the additional minimum mandatory procedures. In the hearing, they were talked about as if they were confidential, but really they're not confidential. We should all be knowing about them. We should be talking to parents that they are in use. They are necessary sometimes, I believe, and we need to be talking about that with parents and letting them know this is something that can happen in their school. So I'm asking, what can the district do to reverse our concerns? Steve Murley sent a really courteous email to all parents when there was something as simple as an early dismissal day due to the heat. And he didn't have to do that, but it was the right thing to do. And I don't think that the value of something even as simple as an email to special education parents regarding the report, what you guys are doing, what's being done, and the corrective actions possibly with the seclusion rooms, there's value in that. We appreciate that, but we haven't heard anything from administration regarding that. And we just want to make sure that, that things are being taken care of. What happens to one of our children happens to all of ours, and we need to know that what's being done to remedy what possibly has been done wrong. Otherwise, we only hear from each other and the media, which I think we can all agree is a problem. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. That's it for community comment. Next item on the agenda is the business consent agenda.
Yeah, I'd like to, at the request of the administrative team, pull items 17 and 18.
Entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda items absent 17 and 18 as pulled by Director Hemingway.
Second?
Review of the bills.
Yes, and Lori did as well. And everything seems in order. There's some, at the cost of football helmets, I would hate to see some kid come off the field and throw it to the ground. So hang on to it and respect the investment.
Good. Thanks, Phil and Lori. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, the next section of the agenda is the annual organization meeting, and basically everything in this section we do on an annual basis. And with that, I'll hand over the chair of the board to Board Secretary. Craig, take it away.
As appointed Secretary of the Board of Education, I'll assume the temporary chair of the board for this process. I declare there to be a quorum of elected directors present as defined under Iowa Code 279.4. I call this organizational meeting to order at this time. We may now proceed to perfect the permanent organization through the election of officers. I will provide over the election of both offices of president and vice president and will administer the oath of office to each individually. We'll now vote on the office of president. Please remember, nominations are not motions, so no second is required for a director to be nominated. If you are nominated to an office, please verbally respond that you are willing to accept that nomination. It would be appropriate at the time a director makes a nomination and it is verbally accepted for that director who makes the nomination to provide affirmative comments on why the nomination is being made. It is also not required. It would be inappropriate for other directors or the board as a whole to discuss or debate the merits of the directors who have been placed in nomination. This is what the vote is for. If we understand those instructions, I'll open the floor for nominations for the office of Board of Education President.
I nominate Chris Liebig.
Okay, I'm willing to entertain that idea.
I nominate Chris Lynch.
I accept the nomination.
Are there any other nominations? The floor is closed to nominations. We have Chris Liebig and Chris Lynch on the ballot. We will now proceed to vote. I'll ask Kim to help me. You will receive a yellow ballot. Please write the name of the individual you are casting your vote for the office of Board of Education President. Kim will then pick up the ballot and we will tally them together. Excuse me.
Seems okay.
All right. Director Rotland votes for, excuse me, Chris Liebig. Director Hemingway votes for Chris Liebig. Brian Kirschling votes for Chris Lynch. Director Deloche votes for Chris Lynch. Director Lynch votes for Chris Lynch. Director Ressler votes for Chris Lynch. And Director Liebig votes for Chris Liebig. We have 4 votes for Chris Lynch as president, 3 votes for Chris Liebig. Chris Lynch, Director Lynch, has been duly elected to the office of Board of Education President. I'll now administer the oath. You stand with me, please? All right. President of the Board, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of School Board President in the Iowa City Community School District, Iowa City, Iowa, as now or hereafter required by law?
I will.
Congratulations. All right, we'll now vote for the office of Vice President. The same instructions apply. The floor is now open to receive nominations for the office of Board of Education Vice President.
I'd like to nominate Latasha Deloche.
Yes. I'd like to nominate Chris Liebig.
Oh. Okay.
Are there any other nominations at this time? All right, the floor is closed to nominations. We have in nomination Director Deloche and Director Liebig for the office of Vice President. We'll now proceed to vote. You will receive, I don't know what color that is, ballot. Please write the name of the individual you're casting the vote for the office of Board of Education Vice President, and Kim will pick up your ballot. Huh? Pink?
It's orange.
Peach? Orange? Goldenrod? I don't know. Does it matter? Really? What? Oh, it is? Okay.
1 in 19 minutes.
All right. Director Rotland votes for Chris Liebig. Director Hemingway votes for Chris Liebig. Director Kirschling votes for Director Deloche. Director Deloche votes for Deloche. Director Lynch votes for Director Deloche. Director Ressler votes for Director Deloche. And Director Liebig votes for Director Deloche. We have 5 votes for Director Deloche and 2 votes for Director Liebig. I declare Director Deloche having been duly elected to the office of Board of Education Vice President. I'll now administer the oath of office. You'll stand with me and raise your right hand, please. Sure. To the Vice President of the Board, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the School Board Vice President and the Iowa City Community School District, Iowa City, Iowa, as now or hereafter required by law?
Yes, I do.
Congratulations. Okay, I'll now allow the new officers to assume their elected duties.
Thanks, Greg. The next item on the agenda is determine the time and place for regular board meetings. And the schedule for the board meetings is in the packet. It basically follows the norm of the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. It's also a norm in December to have one meeting, and that's what's in there. And it's also a norm in March, if it falls on spring break, to only plan for one meeting. We can always add meetings, but this would be the base plan for the next year. I'd entertain a motion to approve the board schedule in the packet.
I move that we approve the board schedule in the packet.
Any discussion? Kim, my computer's rebooting, so I'll have to verbally vote, but I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. Lynch, how would you like to vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next item on the agenda is the School Corporation Council, and there's a packet from Joe in the packet. I'll tell you also that Steve recommends approval of the School Corporation Council by the motion that's in the packet. I'd entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve the School Corporation Council renewal.
Second. Second, going once, twice. So motion fails with lack of a second. Is there discussion on this one?
I think we just need to look into it further. I've got some questions on some of the fees and expenses on the last page that I'm a little concerned with.
Further discussion? I mean, it is a thing you can change. We can change at any time. This is setting up the norm for the next year or so. And again, if you go without counsel, you may lose the ability to access that. So I'd suggest we put this on an agenda relatively quickly. Any comments on that, Craig? Or?
Well, much of your work will come to a grinding halt. We have land transactions that we're trying to complete. There are a number of things that, from personnel-related issues and things like that, that we're very much into right this minute. It would be an extraordinarily difficult time to be without legal counsel. And the board has given us no direction on what alternatives there might be or what that might look like. I think my recommendation would be for you to go ahead and approve legal counsel and then put on an agenda if you wanted to review, and you can change at any time, but being without legal counsel at this point in time could be extraordinarily problematic for us, just from a corporate doing business point of view.
Can I just clarify that? Because it was my impression we were talking about just the council for the board itself, not for the district.
No, that's not the case. We use the board's legal counsel when he represents the school corporation, okay? And so, as such, he has a lot of things in the fire right now, a lot of irons in the fire, and to pull this out at this point in time would be extremely problematic.
Well, I mean, the only reason I'm hesitating is because, it does seem to me like sometimes the board needs separate counsel from the administration or the district, and, I think we saw that with the Van Housen hearing that we held. It was a little awkward for us to be up here with no counsel and for our counsel to be representing one of the two parties. And I'd be fine with approving this as to the district, but my hesitation is about, I'm a little uncomfortable with having the same, I don't think there's a total unity of interest between when the board needs counsel and when the district needs counsel.
I would agree, Director Liebig. That's exactly the case. If Joe puts probably 95% of his time into representing the corporation, when the school board needs representation from an outside party or something like that, he'll represent the school board. But if there's ever a time when he needs to represent the school board or the corporation, he'll represent the corporation, and the school board will need to secure a separate legal counsel at that point in time. And so we saw that most recently in one of the events that we had. And, you're always welcome to get separate legal counsel, but from a corporation point of view, we really need to have the ability to go to legal counsel and keep the work going for the school district.
Is there a process in which we can make sure that happens? Because that's a little bit of my thought is like, how can we go ahead and have a list of names or something when we're in that situation so that we're not up here playing, judge and jury as we were before with no representation? And so if there's a way that we can get a list of possible names, I think that's the thing is like, here's your only option. And so I don't know what other people are hesitating. I'm like, is this not something that we bid out? Or I don't quite get all that piece of it, but I think it's important that we, at least from a board standpoint for legal counsel, get some type of list of potential people in the future that we could reach out to if we need to. Because at that moment, a couple weeks ago, we were kind of like, in a bind. So, if you don't mind can we make a motion?
Well, again, just before we do, I think the important point is I would advise not leaving a void. I think Craig's advice is right on. We can always make a change. If we want to appoint board counsel later or have a list of names later.
Can we put that as part of the motion?
Well, again, you just put it as a future agenda item.
Okay.
Because if we need Craig, if we need Joe tomorrow for a board-related item, and we don't have counsel, then we'll have to book a meeting to get, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's a whole process. So
So,
no action can be as dangerous as action.
Right.
And I think to leave a void is high risk. And if we want to put this on our agenda and work it, then let's put it on our agenda and work it. But
Steve has already developed a list of capable counsel, but depending on the type of issue you're dealing with, you may want to use someone that specializes in that particular area of law. And so it may not be the same person for every particular issue that you come up against. But we do have those lists already, and they can be dusted off and updated and provided to you very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And even if you put it in topic, you know,
Right.
I think that would be helpful. I just think it would be helpful to have something versus kind of not having anyone to reach out to, talk to even suggest a name. I think that's kind of the thing.
so since we can't have the same motion that's just failed for lack of a second, let me try and reword this. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
I move that we approve the School Corporation Council with a future discussion to be had as an agenda item regarding council for various required roles. Does that make sense? Yes. Yes, for various required roles.
is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Is our present contract with Joe going to expire tonight?
Yes.
Okay,
It's on an annual basis,
okay.
is what we...
I just see that it's the top of the one letter is August 15th, but I didn't,
We always approve council at the organizational meeting each
Okay.
year, and so if it doesn't get approved tonight, then we'll be without.
gotcha.
And if there is an interest in changing council, period, how is that done? Is it a transition process? Because we're never going to be without need for council. I
Right.
mean, especially with all the building we have going on.
Right. Yeah, it can take a lot of different forms. I was here the last time when Joe actually came on, and there was a couple of individuals from the Board of Education, actually, that interviewed Joe, interviewed a couple of other very capable attorneys, and made the decision to recommend that Joe be the one for the district to use for the primary general legal work, and that's what we went with.
And so was there a transition time
Mm-hmm.
between the old and the new?
There was. Kirsten Fry was the legal counsel before, if any of you remember that, and there was a transition, and she was able to provide Joe with all of the notes and the files and the follow-up things that made the transition very smooth.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thanks, Kim. Next item on the agenda is Delegate Assembly Representative. And this is the delegate for the IASB Convention on November 16th. Brian has been our rep the last 2 years. Now, obviously, the first requirement is you need to be in Des Moines at the convention on the 16th, so that's kind of the first check. But if there's interest, I'm sure Brian's willing to talk about transitioning. However, you're also willing, I think, to do it again if you need to.
And I think in all fairness, I think as the only one who's been in the room, just to let folks know what that entails, is this is the meeting at the Iowa Association of School Boards, where representatives from 330-something districts gather at the convention. And as one of the larger districts, we along with the other UEN districts, have kind of a weighted level of votes to vote on any resolutions for the Iowa Association of School Boards. It's about a 3-hour meeting on the Wednesday of the convention. Occasionally, we get stuck on some things, and occasionally, like with last year, one might find themselves up arguing against smarter balance versus a whole room of other representatives who don't quite grasp what smarter balance is. I'm looking at you, Chris. Anyhow.
I'm not volunteering, though.
So it's you know, it's something that we need to have a representative for, and I've done it the last 2 years. I'm more than happy to do it again, as I will be there if anybody else wants to do it, by all means.
I'm not opposed to you doing it. I'm just curious who else. I know Latasha's going and I'm going. Who else is planning on going from the board?
I've gone every year up till now. I'm to be determined at this point.
I'm only there on Thursday. I'm not there Wednesday. So.
I can't go.
I'm not able to attend this year.
No.
So I think Brian wins by default.
It's like it's you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
I'll try not to get into too many arguments this year.
All right, Brian's, we don't need to formalize that in a motion, right? Yep. All right, thanks, Brian.
Sure.
I think we do. I think we
It's
do.
an action.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt. All right, I entertain a motion to approve Brian as the delegate assembly representative.
So moved. Or,
Second.
First, Latasha's got the second. What's that?
I second it.
Okay, Paul's got the second.
We have to
Before we
report
finish.
that to IASB, that's why.
Okay. Further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next item on the agenda is to adopt all written policies, guidelines, rules, and regulations and procedure. Again, this is an annual process. That's a good practice. Entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt all written policies, guidelines, rules, regulations, and procedures in accordance with Iowa Code 279.8.
Second.
Any discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. Chris, yours isn't registering.
Voted yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next item on the agenda is all written student, staff, and district handbooks. Again, a good practice to approve this annually and entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt all written student, staff, and district handbooks.
Second.
Any discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. Still not getting
Same
it.
thing, yes.
Yep, thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next item is to appoint the district multicultural gender fair designee. There's a recommendation to appoint Kingsley. So entertain a motion to appoint Kingsley Botchway as the district MCGF designee.
So moved.
Tasha? Any discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Voted yes, so.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
I appreciate the appointment.
All right, thanks, Kingsley. Next item is committees. Again, what's in the content here is a follow-up from the board retreat. I think our last committee meeting on committees. The recommendation is education's full board with the dates proposed in the packet. Operations is Lynch, Liebig, and Hemingway. Policy is Kirschling, Liebig, and Rosler. And financial oversight chair, Phil's going to chair that and review the bills every cycle, and then we'll rotate one director per meeting cycle through with the other audit.
You know, we talked a little bit last time. I'm feeling a little bit like I shouldn't be taking up a spot on both three-person committees, and I guess my choice would be to stick with operations, and if someone else was willing to take policy and governance, my spot, I'd be interested in sharing the wealth a little bit there.
I can do it.
Any other interest?
Thank you.
Tasha's in. And there's a number of drafts in the, there's a draft for the governance committee meeting in this packet, and then we'll start talking the other ones in the next meeting as part of agenda setting. All right, anything else on this topic? All right. Moving into board work. Next item on the agenda is attendance area development, voluntary transfer. And I think if you're aware, this has been a bit of an ongoing discussion, and we talked this at the last board work session. And I think we came out agreeing to a couple things. One is, and I think we came out agreeing to reopen secondary voluntary transfer, being number one. And two, we discussed exceptions or exemptions or special cases and decided that was relatively complicated. So I know, Chris, you want to discuss that a little more tonight. I would suggest from a process standpoint, we may want to break this in two sections or two motions. One, just to reopen secondary voluntary transfer, because I think we're all aligned to that. And then let the debate begin on whether we want to provide exemptions or rules beyond that. But I know Matt's put a recommendation in, but I don't know if we want to proceed with the first. If we think we're all aligned to voluntary transfer, I think we should do a motion and get that reopened and let the debate begin.
Make a motion that we reopen voluntary transfers for secondary schools.
Is there a second?
Second.
Chris has a second. Discussion on that? I think there's been a lot of public support for that, and we've certainly listened to the people involved. And further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Matt, do you want to go through your reco?
Chris,
Yes.
how would you like to vote?
Yes.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Apparently my computer update didn't work very well, so. So Matt, do you want to go through your recommendation and we'll have Chris review his
You bet.
his memo?
Yeah. Thank you, President Lynch.
Can we bring it up, Kristen, just the first attachment?
Pull it right up. Sure. I think you'll find what Steve and I worked to try to summarize the conversation that we felt like was the bulk of the conversation on the 13th of the work session, based around the recommendation we brought you at that time. Most of what you find here in the document centers around capacity numbers. We used future capacity numbers for the top threshold and then current capacity numbers for the lower threshold when looking at our secondary attendance centers. Rationale for this recommendation, we feel like it supports the strategic plan that the board's adopted centering around reading, math, and equitable learning opportunities. It allows for student and family choice when we have capacity availability, and it supports moving to new attendance zones but provides flexibilities for students and families who have already experienced multiple changes due to changes in those attendance areas. I don't need to read the capacity numbers there to you, but you can find those there on the document. And then I think one thing to especially note is with the work you guys have done on secondary attendance zones, the Kirkwood and Alexander areas, of course those transfers would be granted. We would deal with all of those before we would consider any other voluntary transfer requests. So based on how those families request where their junior high assignment would be, we would process those before we take on that voluntary transfer piece. And I think we tried to outline that piece there at the bottom of the first page. We talk about application for voluntary transfers needing to be completed by December 1st. That would allow us to build master schedules and staffing based on the movement of those students. And then on the second page there, you see those capacity statistics with the high school and junior high capacity things, maybe just or capacity data points. A couple things to draw a note to would be southeast capacity and city high capacity. I do anticipate there that we would need to do some work with our modular units at southeast and at city to provide for sufficient capacity, looking at those transfers and looking at where those capacity statistics are through the completion of that FMP. And then the same thing with North Central, we would need to monitor that, as we know we're over 500 students there today. So depending on how many students would potentially voluntarily transfer in there, if we continue down this path, we'd want to look at capacity there and supporting that if we could make that work. So those would be a few quick things to add in an overview without walking you all the way through it. Happy to answer any questions about that. I think it allows for some flexibility in the areas you guys talked about, working with families that have had multiple attendance area changes, while also respecting the integrity of those boundaries you've created and given families a choice and allowing buildings to keep viable programming.
Can I ask one or two follow-up questions?
Sure.
So, with Kirkwood and Alexander, where we've given them the option of choosing a junior high that they're not assigned to, is the idea that they would have that option regardless of the capacity, or would they be subject to the capacity constraint?
I think the way you guys have decided that is it would be irrelevant to the capacity restraint.
Okay.
Those students would just be granted that, and we would just make it work.
I thought too,
Yep.
but I want to make sure. And then when you were talking about modulars, I can understand how at the junior high level, the fact that we have created that situation might then result in the need for space sooner. But at City High, wouldn't it just mean that we wouldn't allow transfers? Like, we wouldn't allow transfers and then build modulars, right? I mean,
Well, I think that's part of probably the discussion point here, that if we're looking at what that capacity is, knowing that we currently could be over that future capacity number when we originally start, that may be something we'd want to consider, that knowing today enrollment at City High being around 1,700, obviously we wouldn't have flexibility to do much on the transfer front without some space considerations that way. So I think that's that's the part that's a little bit tricky about some of these capacity statistics, knowing that our current reality is a little bit different than what we anticipate our current capacity to be at the end of the FMP. And obviously, as attendance zones settle down, and if students do transfer, we're going to have a better handle on where those numbers shake out at that point.
I'd like to chime in on that one too, because what I think is actually brilliant in this is they've recommended using the final capacity numbers. So for example, City was 1593. Now that's after we do some additions at City. So all Matt's saying and what Steve's saying is between now and the additions, if you had to add some portable units to bridge the gap, you're not, denying people the opportunity to be there in the short term, when in the long term, the numbers would work fine. I think it's
that
brilliant.
apply to Liberty also then? I mean,
Sorry?
Liberty's going to get a huge addition too, so are we thinking we would just say, really the capacity is 1,500?
Well, that's what they've said in this reco.
Yeah, it shows the 1425 for Liberty, so we would consider based on that final capacity number.
So if you look at the high side numbers, just to close this point, so City would be 1513 based on a capacity of 1593, right? That's 95%. So same with Liberty, same with West. Now, we could choose to do modulars. We have some 6-plexes and 10-plexes, and we have modulars. Or you could accelerate the additions, right?
Exactly.
Or accelerate So that's why I think it's brilliant, because it bridges between now and the short term. It plans with the end in mind. We're not moving people around based on short-term capacities,
Right.
and we're targeting the end state. And, if there's kids there to pull forward the addition, then great, right? I mean,
Right. I think that would be, something we would work through that facility master plan process, is if there's some project that would bump up to help us get to that final capacity number, because you felt like that was necessary, we'd certainly look at doing that. But otherwise, we could create a temporary solution to the long-term issue with modulars.
so I know you guys like to talk goalposts, right? You've tried to make those goalposts as flexible as possible by some of the assumptions you made, or how you've determined your capacities, right?
Right, I think that allows for the max capacity at the other end to give families flexibility to make the moves they need to move, and then at the other end, it still, like I said, respects the programming that our high schools need to be able to offer too, without having a school that would end up too small or be too disadvantaged based on a number of transfers. But I believe that creates a nice middle ground for some of the things you guys have talked about.
But I guess I'm still wondering because, you know, with Liberty, a freshman in 2017 is going to be gone before that addition ever gets built, on the current schedule at least. And so to let a freshman or a sophomore in 2017 is just going to result in an overcrowded building in 2019, 2020, before the addition ever comes. So I
Well,
don't know
not
why we
necessarily,
wanna
not
do
if we
that.
don't open it full capacity right away. Because right now, based on freshman and sophomore numbers, in that 1,000-student facility, we'd really be looking at 500 students. So we would have some buffer.
But by 2019, we're not looking at numbers like that. I mean, the age progressions put us over 1,000 by 2019.
I think potentially you'd have a couple years where you'd be possibly looking at a tight enrollment period there.
Yeah, so I can understand letting juniors and seniors in as of 2017 if they want to transfer in, because they won't be there by the time the building gets overcrowded. But with freshmen and sophomores, we know that building's going to be over 1,000 by 2019. Why would we let students transfer in there if we know that's just going to push it further over capacity in 2019, 2020?
It's just a choice.
Why don't-
It's just a choice, because you know the addition's
Right.
coming.
Yeah, but they're
And I don't
gone
think it's an
before the
impossible
Just
task, I
because-
guess. I mean, when we look at our current high schools now, we're well over capacity
and
in
hundreds
both
over
of those
right now.
schools. And I guess it answers the question I think a lot of families are asking us about trying to line up some of these attendance patterns for their children. And, you know, I think we have some experience working in over, you know, with buildings that have been over capacity. So while the numbers, it may be close those couple of years, I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge either.
And Matt, if I could add this, I mean, what you got to remember, Chris, is the core of the school is already designed for 1,500. So the core of the school has been built to handle that. So when we say it's 1,000, the core of the school is built for 1,500. It's built to add that extra wing or the end of the wing. We've got Weston City at 130 capacity today, 130% of capacity, and they're not built for that.
Right. If you look at
so-
the common spaces at Southeast, they're not built for 840 kids, you know, they're built for a 600-student school. And so the common spaces, like I think is what you're addressing, that those spaces are built for 1,500 students long-term. So those areas of pressure in some of our other attendance centers at overcapacity would not be that issue at Liberty High School originally.
You don't have all the classrooms that you'd be expecting to have if there were 1,500 kids there.
Well, I think what we've done to address that capacity statistic in our secondary buildings now is teachers may have had an open, you know, their room may have been open for a class period, so they would have had their prep in there. Right now, we've scheduled courses in those. So I think when things start to get tight, you get creative on classroom spaces, and another teacher may be in that classroom during a prep period. So I think there's ways around that. That's why I say I think we have a lot of experience working with buildings at capacity and what that looks like, but I understand
Yeah, I mean, the
what
whole
your
point was
concerns.
to sort of get us out of that situation, I thought, you know, so I don't know why we'd want to create that situation for a couple of years at the new high school. But, you know, see what other people say.
So, Matt, I'm confused. Are you departing from your recommendation and saying that you don't think there should be a capacity cap at 95%?
No, I don't. No, I don't think that's what I said. So the 95% puts it at 1425. So I think we're still in line there
Oh,
with
because you're using
the
1,500
final
as the
capacity.
capacity,
Yeah.
not 1,000.
Right.
But you are still suggesting that there be an 80% lower capacity, or under capacity figure still.
Yeah, we talk about 80% capacity and then back to 75% capacity when that overall district capacity is complete in 2021.
80% be based on the future capacity or on the current capacity?
Current.
The,
The only place that probably matters.
Current.
that's on the current.
And does that 80% include students that are going to Tate? Are those students included in their home school count or in the Tate school count?
I believe those students are counted in their home school count, depending on, I guess, when we look at those numbers. You know, some students would be counted in the original projection and then may move to Tate at some point during the school year. So that's a little bit of a case-by-case basis with the 120 to 130 students we have at Tate, depending on when they've started at Tate. If they start in the middle of the year, obviously they'd be counted in these statistics for their home school. But if they were already at Tate prior to the year, then they wouldn't have been figured into those numbers as we consider them when they would come in, when we would work through the transfers. Does that make sense?
The 80% at West is 1347, so we wouldn't let West fall below 1347. But it seems kind of funny to say, well, you can't transfer out of West, which has 1347, into Liberty, which probably has a lower number. You know, so I'd be more comfortable with sort of an absolute number than a percentage figure. Because isn't it probably the case that Liberty's not going to be up at 1347 yet? In 2017, it's certainly not. So why wouldn't we let someone transfer out of a school with 1347 students into a school with less than 1,000 students?
I'm not sure that 1347 is going to come into play real soon. I mean, that would be a pretty sizable group of students leaving. So I guess I'm not sure how much of an issue that 80% number at West is right away.
I have a feeling it might never be an issue.
Right,
That's
and
one
I think
reason
that's
I'm not
one
even
thing.
thinking we necessarily need a lower bound.
Right. I think one thing you guys tried to communicate a little bit at the work session I understood is, you know, we also wanted to monitor this situation, right? That we wanted to try something and then we wanted to come back to the table once we had some numbers. So I think that would be an important piece to do this, you know, as the first time we step into it. So we would work through those transfers the first year. We'd bring back the data, what that looks like. Are we still satisfied with what that policy looks like and what results it's giving to us? I think that was some trepidation, at least I heard at the work session, was, you know, what are those numbers going to shake out to be, and what's going to be our data point to come back and look and say, is this having the intended consequences we thought it would?
So in all cases, the city, or at city as well, the capacity cutoff of 95% would be considered with the increased capacity.
Correct.
Okay, so because I think they were going to be at, I have it here somewhere, 93% or something, without Alexander, and which would put them over if any Alexander students go in. But you're saying that's not relevant because we're looking at the increased amount of capacity, not the capacity there today.
Right, we'd be looking at that future capacity number. Yep, and remember those Alexander kids would be treated differently. They're first to Alexander and Kirkwood. Families, we'd process those before those other voluntary
High school
transfers.
as well?
The high school?
Yeah, excuse me, I just realized you were talking city. I had my head southeast there, so sorry. Yep.
I think it's brilliant because you've opened the goalposts pretty wide, let people decide what they want to do. I agree with your point, Matt. We did agree, you know, if December 1's the deadline, I think we'd like to have a conversation before, not that we're looking to approve anything, but I think we'd like to understand the situation. And, you know, if everybody's been accepted, I suppose that's very positive, but we'd like to just understand the numbers. So somewhere in December, early January, probably in December, we'd want to understand where do you think we're at.
I think if we had our data, you know, if we had our request made by December 1st, we could work through that data. We could probably come back to you early January, I would imagine, to say, hey, this is where we stand at this point, once we process them and get the data out.
I just don't want us to be the constraint to telling people they're approved or not or whatever. So you'll have the numbers by December 1. I think I'd think about our meeting in December, a work session, reviewing what you got.
Yeah, we can probably turn that around. I don't see that as a huge issue.
I just think that based on the work that we did in the work session 2 weeks ago with everybody back there, I think that this recommendation is reflective of the discussion. And, you know, thank you for putting it together. I think that there was a lot of good input from all board directors during that work session and administration. And I think that this is right on target.
One other follow-up question. So in the second year of Liberty's existence, are we not going to let people transfer out if it's going to bring that number below 800?
So I guess the piece there is that maybe needs to be clarified in the previous motion you made, and maybe you guys feel like that's already in place, but the 9th and 10th graders at Liberty, of course, we wouldn't allow them to transfer out right away, right? Because that's the first year. So, you know, you have that base, and then the second year, you would have those 3 full grade levels there. So, yeah, I think we would want to look at that to say what reason would we be granting transfers at that point if our capacity number shows that they're already under that. That would be, yeah, I think we would want to look at that, Chris. And I don't think we know where that number is going to be to assume that it's at or going to be below 700 because we don't have solid statistics from our juniors and seniors yet either to know where exactly are we with that. We may be well over that point at that point.
I wouldn't want to see it fall below 800 either.
Yeah.
But it does make you think a little bit differently about what's going to look like. Yeah, I'm still feeling like I don't see, you know, in the year or two before we know that an addition is going to be built, I can see letting it go a little bit over. But when we're 5 years beforehand and those kids are going to be all the way through the system before the addition is built, I don't really understand the logic for letting it go over capacity during that time.
Again, I think the logic would be that the core of the school is designed for that, and we can always accelerate those plans if we so desire.
Well, but the same thing could happen in reverse. I mean, we don't really know that addition's going to get built until it gets built, or at least until fairly soon before. You know, if we did have a funding issue, what if we can't build it as soon as we wish we could?
It's just something that we just need to keep an eye on and keep revisiting. I mean, if we need to close voluntary transfer at some point because of that, I think as a board we can do that. I think we just need to be able to be flexible because we're asking our community to be flexible in that we're providing space for them to be able to have voluntary transfer. So we need to be flexible also as a board in making sure that if things get to that point that we make some hard decisions at that point. I mean, we can't guess. We're really in a situation where we're kind of sort of close to the number. We're not going to have we know that it's going to be 1325. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be a flex here. Families are going to move in and out. There's so many other pieces that can happen here that could change this. So, I think some of that we have to be a little bit flexible and keep our eye on it and keep getting updates from administrators about what that is looking like from year to year, or I don't know, twice a year, or however we want to look at it.
Just a couple points I wanted to make. I agree with Latasha about being flexible. I think this plan allows us to see, we open up the transfers, year one, by December 1st, you get us, we know how many people want to transfer. That'll give us an idea. Right now, we're all kind of guessing that all the kids that all the Kirkwood kids are going to want to go to Northwest or North Central, and we don't really know until we actually allow that to happen. Once that happens, we'll be able to, I think as a board, before we put that bond proposal together, look at the facility master plan like we're going to and say, hey, we may need to accelerate North Central's expansion or Southeast expansion so that we know going in, we know how many kids, we have a pretty good feel how many kids want to go there, what things maybe need to be accelerated. And then on the flip side, I think if for whatever reason the bond doesn't pass, which I really hope it does, and I think it will, if it doesn't pass, then I think, like Latasha said, we have to go back and be able to say, okay, we got to close this off because we got to, we're not going to have the capacity we thought we were going to have right away. We've got to relook at that. So I think having this plan is a good plan. I'm in favor of this plan. I know Chris may bring up his memo that he wrote, but I think that this covers a lot of those areas and takes it out of the board's hand for having to write policy or have a laundry list of reasons for people to transfer or not. Leaves it up to the discretion of the administration.
Point of clarification, so is it not assumed that if you're in a school your freshman year that you would be granted admission to that school every year thereafter? I don't see that written in your memo. I just want to make sure that I understand that that is not what you're saying.
Right, just because you begin as a freshman. If you've completed your freshman and sophomore year, we have the junior-senior rule where that allows you to stay and finish. We pretty typically process that, but just because you've completed your freshman year doesn't necessarily entitle you to that. One thing that I think we've talked about here that you're right isn't stipulated in here, this would be a one-time grant though, so if you would apply and be granted that transfer, that we would consider that for this one. There wouldn't be an annual application to these transfers. Is that what you're asking, Lori?
Well, the reason I ask is because, as Director Liebig pointed out, there isn't a guarantee that there's going to be an addition. And if we allow freshmen to transfer in 2017, by 2019, they'll be over capacity, as we know. And the idea is that by 2022, I think, they have their addition. But if they don't have their addition, if students are still coming and they're allowed to stay for 4 years, it's going to be massively overcrowded very soon.
I think that's where
I'm just wondering, when the other directors are saying we can revisit it, are we going to pull that back then midstream in high school and say, no, we are not guaranteeing that you get to stay all 4 years.
Well, I think,
Or are we going to say, oh, we granted it once, you can stay? I just want to make sure I understand.
are you just asking like liberty-wise? Because if we grant it the first year, we'll know after that first year if we pass the bond or not, right? So if we pass the bond, we know that expansion is going to come. If we don't pass the bond, then in the next year you don't accept the transfers, it's going to put them over, is the way I
And
understand it.
oftentimes when districts don't pass bonds, they have additional bonds. So, I would,
Right.
I mean, who knows what will happen, but, we may have a second
there's
bond
growth.
vote, we may have a third bond vote. So it may go on. And I hear people saying that they want flexibility, and I understand that, but I guess I'm just trying to make sure I understand, are we going to interrupt the 4 years, or are we saying once you're in, and it's only new freshmen that would not be allowed to then come in?
Right.
That was my understanding with putting this forward would be once they're granted, there's no reapplication, you're granted
4 years.
for the 4 years, and then based on the conversation I've heard here tonight would be you would revisit about if you would continue to grant new freshman transfers into that building, similar to how, whether it's a bond, whether it's modulars, whatever the solution is. I think you could visit all those topics at that point once you had the data to support how many students are attending there and what the need is.
But it's also not just new freshmen, because it would be, for some reason, I went to City High, and my sophomore year I decided I wanted to transfer to be
Sure.
new sophomores, juniors, not just
Yeah.
new freshmen.
You'd be considering all grade bands, yeah.
I would say it would be good to have that stated explicitly,
Right.
because that's not clear to me in this, and I could see that over time that could get lost. So,
Some of the people at the DPO meeting after the last board meeting were talking about that issue. So I think that would give some people some confidence that if they do transfer in, it's not the type of a thing where they're up for a lottery every year after that. That'd give them some reassurance.
Sure, and I don't know if you guys would just want to add that to your motion. I mean, if you do move forward with one of the plans here this evening, and you've already approved the transfers, or if you want us to come back with that specified, or how you'd like to handle that, Chris?
A motion isn't required, right?
Yeah.
So I think we should come back perhaps with clarification on the ongoing voluntary transfer process overall. Would be my 2 cents. Because we talked a few of these things where maybe you do it every 2 years. Now, probably at high school, once you're in, or once you're in a junior high, you're probably fine, you know what I mean? But I wonder if you should bring back, I think what we should see is the updated overall voluntary transfer process.
The only problem with bringing it back is that delays our timeline in starting, so if we're really going to have them completed by December 1st, we'd like to start communicating this out in October.
We're
to get that.
not stopping you from doing anything.
So you're okay?
You've got marching orders to move forward, I think.
Okay.
I think what we're asking about is, again, after this, what is the renewal process? So for next year or 2 years from now, how's that working? In the work session, we talked about administratively, maybe it's not every year, maybe it's every 2 years, and then if you go every 2 years, once you're in high school, you're kind of in. Once you're in junior high, you're kind of in. But I think what we should see back is the ongoing voluntary transfer process, and how often do you have to renew?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that all we would do tonight, one way or another, is give you some direction, and that, we weren't going to actually pass a policy or anything tonight. We'd give you enough direction to get this done for what you need to do right away. But I do think that eventually it'd be nice to have this written down, whether it's an administrative guideline or not, so that people kind of can look at it and see it.
Well, administratively, you developed the voluntary transfer guidelines, right?
Yep.
We
I'm
didn't
not
do
sure
that.
those capstone rules are anywhere in there. That's one of the things we'd have to clarify, Does it just juniors and seniors, is it sophomores, juniors, and seniors? 8th graders and 6th graders supposedly too. So, anything that needs to be in there.
That's why I think it's worth bringing it all back, so we see it all. But again, that shouldn't be a constraint to going, right? You can go.
Okay.
It's more for on an ongoing basis,
Yeah. I mean, we can certainly bring those things back. If you're comfortable with this approach, then I think we would move forward and start contacting families and making sure they're aware of their options and starting to collect that data back so we'd be well positioned by December to know where our numbers are at.
Yeah, I really wanted to ask about the contacting of people, so it's, for example, we have these 2 schools now that'll have options at the junior high level. Is there going to be sort of a uniform effort at both schools to mass email and follow up with families to make sure they know there's some kind of deadline on exercising that option?
Yeah, we would use our communication measures to make sure people are aware of what potential's out there, especially since voluntary transfers hadn't been a possibility before. We would communicate out necessary information, guidelines, dates. I think we would also be intentional about contacting Kirkwood and Alexander families in particular to let them know, to signal a preference there of where they would like to attend junior high. There may be a couple other attendance areas just that are affected primarily by some attendance changes that we'd want to make sure we were intentional about communication there too, other than just our general broad communications to the whole school populace.
Mm-hmm.
Will there be someone in particular for each one of those elementary schools that people will have as their one contact person about this, or will they be coming through the ESC here to talk about it?
Well, transfers get submitted back to our office,
Right,
but
I
if
mean,
they have
like,
questions,
is there
I
a
think we
contact
could.
person?
Yeah, I think in that communication, I think we could identify who their contact at their building would be to
Okay.
who they could get a hold of if they had questions. Certainly, they can still call our office, but if they feel more comfortable with the building contact, we could.
Families sometimes are just
Sure.
more connected to where their
Yep.
kids are.
Well, then even our own people know who the point person is. So if they get questions, they can say, please talk to Latasha because she's fully up to speed on what's going on.
Yeah, no.
I'll send them all to you.
No, that's okay. I'll send them right
Not
back
literally,
to you.
All right.
not literally, but, you know.
Then just one more clarification, I guess, if something, if you guys are adding things, is that if someone transfers into a junior high, that doesn't mean they're automatically feed into the high school. They would have to reapply for that transfer when they go to high school as well.
Again, I think we assumed with a straight feeder pattern that we may not ask for that reapplication, but you're right, that's probably a good thing we should clarify one way or another, because I can see how people would interpret that differently. So instead of a reapplication piece there, the tricky part with that would be then you'd be combining those capacity numbers to try to make an assumption for 6 years instead of 4. So we could definitely bring that back. I think right now,
I think we're willing to, so the
Yeah.
pendulum kind of went far one way, right? Annual renewal for everything.
Yep.
Except capstoning. I think what we're asking to just bring it back a little bit, right? Let's not go back to, I mean, there's a reason we put, you know, we want people to attend their home school. And, you know, you can voluntary transfer if you provide your own transportation and there's room. But anyway, let's keep it. So I'm just being mindful, while we're asking you to back off, I don't think we want to go back to where it was before, where you know, you apply once and it's never revisited. But let's, like you say, let's have that discussion as you bring it back.
So I guess I'm still kind of hoping we get to the discussion of how we're going to treat hardship arguments. You know, the thing that's worrying me about that is if it's a purely case-by-case discretionary determination, you know, by the administration, that and even with the best of intentions, it's going to be impossible to be as consistent as you would like, and I think fairness issues are going to come up, and especially since, and we can talk about how we're going to handle these things, but you know, if we're telling Kirkwood students, freshmen and sophomores at least, you must go to Liberty that year because all freshmen and sophomores must go, you know, does that mean that hardship arguments about how, well, it'd be easier for us to be at West won't be entertained, but hardship arguments about people wanting to get into Liberty will be entertained, and that's going to create a fairness issue. And so, again, I'm not thinking we necessarily have to pass any rules tonight, but in the end, I'd be a lot more comfortable with having a set of criteria that's going to be consistently applied to people who, you know, want some kind of exception to the usual process, including the usual process that you can't transfer out of that newly built school. And I'm not even so attached to any special set of rules, but I'm very anxious about, you know, the way that just biases and arbitrariness can sneak into anything that's purely discretionary. So even if it's just a question of us kind of giving you direction on some types of things that we expect to come up, I'd be a little bit interested in pinning some of that down in advance, or at least getting your take on sort of what is the criteria going to be that you think will get used to decide whether someone will be allowed to, you know, transfer in because of this sort of new hardship category. We got the old hardship category I'm totally with you on, you know, And the other thing that wasn't totally clear, I assume under the old hardship category, you get the transfer whether there's capacity or not. Are we thinking under this sort of boundary change hardship category, it's not subject to capacity, or that it would be? So some of that stuff I just feel a little bit, it's kind of really not pinned down, and I have no idea, and people won't have any idea where they stand until they apply and find out. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that one thing? I mean, if there's a hardship because of the boundary changes as they affect you, you're going to get a transfer regardless of capacity?
Well, if yes, I guess is where that's handled in there. I think that's part of the challenge here, is that we'd be looking at, you know, those hardship transfers in that way, just similar to how we consider the other hardship transfers, is that if they meet one of those categories, then we grant the transfer. So I think that's the piece in here, that if they have a hardship related to attendance area transition, then we'd be granting that transfer.
And then, what do you think
Can I
is
just,
going to be, how are you going to judge whether someone's got a hardship? Any idea?
Well, I think, you know, as far as judging whether they're a hardship, you know, multiple changes, I'm sure would be a consideration. I think there'd be a lot of different factors in there. Siblings would be another factor. I think there's a lot of different things that we could detail out as far as what would rise to a hardship. I think the problem with putting things into different categories or trying to outline all those, Director Liebig, is that we're going to find at some point somebody that doesn't fit into one of those, and we're still going to be dealing with that scenario. So I think that's the challenge with trying to detail all those things out, that we're still at some point going to deal with somebody that has a hardship that isn't identified into one of those categories, and we're still going to have to make a decision based on that.
Well, and I'm open to that. On the other hand, if we can identify some categories that we do think merit some kind of special treatment, I don't see why not just to go ahead and let you know what we think those are. So, you know, I have pointed out the Van Allen, the North Lincoln situation, possibly, you know, the City High situation where we're peeling people off and not really sending them with a whole lot of classmates over to some different high school. I'd be interested in at least talking through some of those. The siblings thing we talked about, it seemed like there was some consensus last week for making some special treatment for siblings, but maybe not forever.
I mean, with regard to the sibling thing, I would just be very cautious about anything that resembles bootstrapping or grandfathering. I really think that those are, and I said at the work session, I think that families need to have those discussions amongst themselves within their own family unit. And I really don't think that we need to be going down that path again, because we've done that before and had nearly disastrous results, and I'd say we should avoid that.
I just wanted to say for the public, for anybody who's not followed this conversation, hardship transfers can be many things. So for example, it's not uncommon for us to have students that have safety or security concerns or other custody concerns, or, you know, we see it all, right? So there is a time where, based on the safety, security, and well-being of the student, they'll be granted a transfer irregardless of capacity, and that gets very discretionary and very confidential. So that's certainly one of the ways people can get hardship. We talked a few other things with, like, say, number of changes and other things that have potentially gone on. But anyway, I just want to provide a little context there. That's kind of what we're talking about. So,
I mean, I guess if, you know, if we did that and then it sort of came back to us that, you know, people at North Lincoln neighborhood who had chosen to attend Southeast Junior High were not being given some kind of exception to the rule that they have to go to Liberty, then I'm going to say, well, gee, I really wish we had pinned that down, because I don't know if there's consensus for that, but I kind of feel like, boy, people have already chosen to opt into the Southeast City Path. They ought to be allowed to finish out the Southeast City Path, you know, already having made one transition away from their assigned route. I mean, is there at least some consensus for situations like that should be considered a hardship?
again, the challenge, so this is what I'd like to do. I like your list. I'd like to review it when we get the voluntary transfers and just make sure that there haven't been any denials that fit this criteria.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with the Van Allen piece.
So let me tell you the two things I like. One is you wrote them down, which is always nice.
Mm-hmm.
And two, you time bound them. You time bound them all.
Most of them, yeah.
Last forever, because as Brian alluded to, with transitions like our Lincoln transition. There was grandfathering that was still going on 5 years later. It was incredibly complex and confusing, and we've just ended up with a totally splintered feeder system over multiple years, and, you know, there's no end in sight from that, you know. So I think it's important that they're clear, documented, and time-bound. Just like we talked at the work session, though, it's really hard to set a set of rules, because if we set 10 rules, then the next five people will be asking for the next set of rules, and it just becomes a challenge. And I just think we should look, I don't necessarily disagree with any of these in here. I just like to, let's let people apply. If anybody's been disadvantaged because of one of these, that you're going to deny it, I think that's the conversation we want to have in December. And then we'll see if the system works fine and it's working naturally, then we're good to go. If we're actually denying people, I think we need to compare it versus this list.
I mean, I do think there's also this issue that, you know, I don't know where people are going to be on, but if you've got, you know, one of the reasons we've been sort of arguing about these secondary boundaries for so long is that there were transportation concerns, and so I'm just kind of curious whether we will consider transportation concerns to be a hardship enough that you would get an exception to one of the rules. So if Alexander is assigned to West, but somebody comes and makes an argument, you know, actually that's really hard for us, we don't have a car, it's, you know, much easier if we would be able to go to the city, I can get there easier. And if they can substantiate it, is that the type of thing that we would consider to be a hardship, or have we kind of precluded that with the assignment of Alexander to West? And you could make the same question about Kirkwood, which again would be normally not allowed to transfer back into West in the first year. If they raise the type of transportation concern that we were, you know, talking about, is that the type of thing we're thinking would count as a hardship?
I'm not sure why we would need to consider it in the hardship category. They'd be asking for a voluntary transfer.
But
So
in the
we'd
first
look
year
at the
of Liberty-
voluntary, we wouldn't go back and provide transportation either
Oh.
way. So, I mean, I think we'd just take it on the surface that they're applying for a transfer and run it through our process. So,
The Kirkwood people would not be allowed normally to transfer back into West in that first year, so they'd have to get themselves out of that blanket rule. The hardship thing would get them out of that, if we think of that as a hardship. And the Alexander kids, I mean, maybe it wouldn't be an issue, because if we're going to talk about future capacity, but, you know, they might be in a situation where there's no capacity at City, and so unless they have some special treatment under the voluntary transfer rule, they wouldn't be allowed to transfer back into City unless they could get them, you know, make a hardship argument. So it might hinge on whether that qualifies as a hardship.
I think we could run through scenarios all night, Director Liebig, but I think the best thing is going to be for us to, I mean, my recommendation would be we try this, we bring back the numbers, we show you what we did, and if that's out of line with what you as a board are thinking and what you'd like to have happen, we can certainly revisit that. But I'm not sure I'm going to be able to effectively answer all those different scenarios and,
But I'm not
and
sure
to
you
know
should have
those.
to
So,
either. I almost
yeah.
wonder if you should get some board guidance on at least that one, because it's such an issue that we've kind of been wrestling with.
But this, Chris, this is exactly how we ended the work session, right?
Say again?
This is exactly how we ended the work session. It's really not possible to list all the possible exceptions or hardships.
Well, and I'm open, like I say, I'm not saying necessarily we will cut off any other possibility, but if we can identify some that we kind of do want as exceptions, it seems like we'd be doing Steve and Matt a favor.
Well, except that, again, as you start granting exceptions, you're going to have the long list of the next people that think they're in the same boat, right?
Well, and that's exactly why I feel like we should have clear rules about it.
So if I understand correctly, hardship doesn't apply to anybody other than freshmen, sophomores assigned to Liberty the first year. Everybody else gets voluntary transfer if they want it, because there's going to be capacity within our FMP.
But they might put a building under 80%.
They
Depends on
might
your,
put the building under 80%. That would be the one
depends
barrier.
on your definition of hardship, though, because again, if there was a safety or security concern,
You know, but I'm saying, but that would be, hardship would be the only thing that applies to is freshmen and sophomores assigned to Liberty, because everybody else gets to transfer because there's room.
I think there'd be quite a bit of flexibility for us to be able to grant those based on capacity, I think is what I'm hearing you say, Director Rutland. So, you know, the idea of hardship, how often would that come into play? I do think that's why I'm somewhat comfortable coming forward with that, to say I think most of these we can look at through a capacity basis, irregardless of the hardship piece. That may not be the case, and I think that's why we've tried to account for it in there, that maybe there's a piece where, something's going to happen that we didn't expect, and we still need to be able to work with that family. So, but I think you are right to tend to think that most of this should be dealt with through capacity considerations.
Yeah, so really, I mean, from how I see the projections for capacity, according to the FMP, there's going to be capacity for everybody to transfer everywhere they want to go. Am I incorrect in that?
Potentially.
Never say never, never say always, but yeah, I think it's pretty wide open.
Yeah. Again, the only people that would not be granted that option would be the freshmen, sophomores assigned to Liberty the first year. But
Right.
beyond that, it's wide open. Okay, thanks.
All right, any action or
Well, we
further
talked
discussion
last
on-
week, we had that motion on the table last week about giving Kirkwood and Alexander the same option at the high school level as they have at the junior high level. And, people thought it might want to talk about it on the work session first. I'm kind of feel like we could at least talk that one more time now that we've had the work session. In the short term, maybe there's not an issue because there's capacity, but in the longer term, it would be. What do people think?
Well, I'd definitely like to come back in December with the actual numbers, and if we want to have a meeting between now and then to review the current voluntary transfer system. Is that it? Maybe it's in November, I don't know.
I'm still in favor of granting them the opportunity to have that option
That'd be-
without having to make a hardship argument.
So even if they put the building over capacity, even if they put the departing school under 80%?
That's for,
It really only applies the first year.
and that's for Kirkwood and Alexander.
Well, just since those are the schools we did it for at the
Right.
junior high level.
Yeah, I'd be for that as well.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm not interested in discussing that because the board has twice in the last 5 months voted that down, both in May.
Well, that's why I'm curious but at the same time,
And
it seemed to
again,
be
2
opening
weeks
up
ago.
voluntary transfers to undo that.
You asked if we're interested. I'm telling you I'm not interested. I think the board has voted twice in May and again 2 weeks ago.
Well, 2 weeks ago, though, people said, we want to talk about it first. Some people said that, at least.
Some people
I guess
said that.
I guess I would like to make that motion then.
But the board said, the vote was no on that. So some people said they wanted to talk about it. You asked, I'm expressing my opinion.
No, that's fine, I understand.
I'm entitled to express my opinion.
Sure.
I'm not interested in discussing it.
I would like to make that motion to say that both Kirkwood and Alexander would have the option of voluntary transfer. Kirkwood would have the option of voluntary transfer to West, and Alexander would have the option of voluntary transfer to City without transportation, but on the same basis that they have it at the junior high level.
Did you get that, Kim?
I think so.
Is there a second?
Second.
Just for
Discussion.
clarification, currently, doesn't Alexander and Kirkwood have the option, except for I know the freshman, sophomore, I don't need to be reminded of that. Don't they have the option already to voluntary transfer? What we just currently open voluntary transfer? I'm just making sure. I'm like, are we making a
But it's
redundant
subject
motion?
to those two things of there being 95%, no more than 95% capacity at the receiving school, and they won't put a building below 80% capacity at the departure school.
So we're just gonna throw that out.
Well, as I understand it, those are not applicable at the junior high level, the way we're treating Kirkwood and Alexander. And
Okay,
so,
but wouldn't that put our schools at a disadvantage of being inequitable if
well,
we go below?
but we did it at the junior high level.
We went below at the junior high level?
Well, we just said you get to do it regardless of what effect it has on capacity.
But that's because I don't think that we're about to go under capacity with our junior high. Our numbers are so
But over.
high. Yeah, but under is more dangerous than over in this. I believe. If we get too low, then we really start at the secondary level, kids start losing opportunities for classes, etc. Versus over, we make more space. Versus under, it's not in existence. So I think that's an equity problem if we do that. If we just kind of just throw it out there and just I'm just saying, I mean, if we're thinking about trying to look out for what's best for kids, we need to remember that piece right there, that kid that wants to take that advanced class and we disadvantage them on purpose by saying, too bad your class went under capacity. I'm just saying that we need to consider that.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm not as bothered by that because of that number. The place we'd be talking about is West, about an Alexander student that wants to go to City, but maybe they would put West below 80%, and I still look at West at 1,200 and something, and I think that's an okay number. So that's the only reason that's not bothering me as much.
Just to be clear, I'm going to vote no because we voted on this before, and I'm willing to entertain in December going through your list and comparing versus actual results. I think we've very much opened the opportunity for people to do what they want to do, and let's see if that works. If it doesn't, then I'm willing to reconsider it.
I'm in the same boat with Director Lynch. I will vote no on this because we voted on it at the last meeting. And I also would like to have, as I've said earlier, I'd like to see what happens with who wants to transfer instead of making the assumption that everyone's going to want to transfer.
I just can't disadvantage kids like that when I know that's what, yeah, I just can't.
All right, further discussion? Kim, we're ready to vote?
Can I just clarify, please, that I have the motion correct? I have a motion to allow option of voluntary transfer of Kirkwood to West and Alexander to City without transportation.
Without transportation, on the same basis as we allow at the junior high levels.
Online voting is open. Chris? How would you
No.
vote? All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Deloach, Hemingway, and Rutland voting yea, and Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting nay.
Actually, I voted wrong, sorry. I don't know how to do that. I think I clicked on the wrong button. I voted nay.
You voted nay.
I voted nay, but I think it clicked yay.
Craig, any guidance?
How do I do that? I really do think I clicked on the wrong one.
Just clarifying the vote. All right.
So just to clarify, Deloach, you vote nay.
Yeah.
So the motion fails with Directors Liebig, Hemingway, and Rutland voting yea, and Directors Deloach, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting nay.
All right, any further discussion on this topic?
Just one quick thing. We've been talking all about voluntary transfer and everything like that. As far as open enrollment, are we putting a higher priority on voluntary transfer before open enrollment?
Yeah, I think we would want to make sure that, we're able to meet our family's needs before we consider those of those students open enrolling into the district. Yep, we want to make sure our capacity is sufficient for those kids.
Fantastic. But if we had capacity, then we're looking for the new money coming in.
Exactly.
Yeah, and tonight it's on C5, we had 1 transfer in and 18 transfers out. So that's a trend we'd like to reverse.
And open enrollment's not school-specific, right? So, we can always move people around inside the district. That's not going to change whether we have capacity for...
Right. Once we make the decision placement's still our determination on where.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, moving on. Next agenda item is start a school update. We're going to talk traffic and air conditioning, and I think general transportation update. Craig, you're up first.
Just some key points from...
Craig, if you get your mic.
Just some key points on transportation. We did meet yesterday with Durham. We meet with them every other month or so just to kind of touch base with how things are going in various aspects of our operation. And they said that this was probably one of the best starts to the school year that they've had, even though they had a number of challenges and changes this year. as you very well know. Our new bell schedule really required them to reroute the entire district, along with the elimination of the discretionary busing. And so all of those changes were incorporated into the new routes, and but they actually went pretty smooth. I'll just give you a few numbers. In last year, we had 92 routes. This year, we have 81. So we were able to reduce 11 routes, and at $40,000 a route, that starts to add up to be significant money. They were able to effectively tier the routes, saving us money. Most all the routes are tiered at this point in time. One of the pinch points that creates, however, is that after-school activities, when we need to have drivers and buses available, for instance, like when we take the band to the Iowa Homecoming to play, they're actually out on routes now because of the new bell schedule and the tiering that goes on. And so we had to get creative this year and call on Clear Creek Amana for some buses to take our kids down there because we simply didn't have the hardware or the drivers in the numbers that we needed because they were all out on routes at that time. So, you know, some of these unintended circumstances come up, and you just deal with them as they go along, but we're working through those issues. We did increase in our contract, if you remember, to a 15% spare ratio, which has really helped us a lot to accommodate these additional field trip requests and those kind of things. And so that was a good move on our part to have that spare ratio in there. But the 11 route reduction is pretty significant. We're actually carrying 5,133 students on roster. Last year, to compare with that, it was 5,667. So we have reduced the number of kids, and it's because of the discretionary busing piece that we're not having those students being carried. We had a rough start in North Liberty. Okay, let's just lay it all out there. It got a little congested at Penn and Garner and Van Allen. But checking on it here on the last couple of weeks, things have settled down into a routine. We got caught up in the same traffic jams as the parents got caught up in, and so the buses were running late, and they didn't run on time that first week nor the second week, but we have made some adjustments, and I'm pleased to report that we're back within that 10-minute tolerance that we give ourselves one way or another, and the buses are arriving and leaving on time at those buildings. Wait for the first snow, and all of that will fall apart again. So just
I don't think it snowed last year, did it?
stay tuned. What?
About 4 billable snows last
4 snows. See.
As far as the ridership, we had to better balance the North Liberty ridership. All the inner workings that you probably don't want to know about transportation, but we schedule buses kind of like airplanes. We overschedule because we know that a lot of kids won't ride on a regular basis. So a 71 capacity bus, we could actually schedule 80 kids for that bus. And we're fine within those tolerances because those kids don't show up on a regular basis. The problem is that the North Liberty kids did show up and our buses were overcrowded. And so we had to rebalance those. And so that message went out, and as of yesterday, those buses have been rebalanced. And so the West North Liberty tiers have been rebalanced, and we've taken care of those overcrowding, that overcrowded situation on the buses. We also have to recognize that this time of year we haul more gear, band, instrumental music gears up. Kids are carrying stuff onto buses. It actually reduces our capacity on those buses, and so you know, all of those things factor in there. But we're working through those. We were able to accommodate Twain's request for an earlier drop-off. We rerouted that. Trek and Weber requested later drop-off times. We were able to accommodate that. We rerouted 3 buildings because of para accommodations for the bus monitors. We're currently transporting 415 students on pay-to-ride, and there is a waiting list currently at Van Allen of 7 students and at Coralville Central at 7 students. I am told that the student family advocates at those buildings are working with those parents, pairing them up or making those contacts between the parents so that there can be more carpooling that takes place, and they seem to be accommodating those families that need to get their kids to school, even though they're on our waiting list. All of these parents actually put in applications after the deadline, so we weren't able to schedule them when we were doing our scheduling, and so therefore they did fall onto the waiting list. And so just a couple more things. The traffic delays getting in and out of the elementary buildings seems to have settled down. We still have quite a struggle at West, just simply because of the volume of students and the number that drive, and just Dwayne and I were over there last week, and it's an incredible thing to watch. If you want some entertainment sometime, just go over there during dismissal, and it's really quite an event. We are experiencing some problems around town. The Gateway project on Dubuque Street has caused us some rerouting concerns. We survived the First Avenue closure for the train track. That's now in our rear view mirror, which is great. And but road closures continue to pop up. We accommodate, we adjust, and the final thing is that we're starting to see a number of student discipline issues crop up on our buses that is really a pretty high concern for us, and we really need to dig into that a little bit more and see why that's occurring and how we can really manage that. You know, riding a bus is a privilege, it's not a right, and our students, we hold them to a particular standard of conduct on the buses. Durham works directly with our building principals on maintaining that conduct, and so we might have to set a child off of the bus for a period of time while they rethink their conduct, and then allow them back on, and those things take place on a regular basis, but we are experiencing a little bit of that right now. So anything else I can answer for you in transportation, or does that pretty well cover it?
I'm just curious, what percentage of the pay-to-ride is free and reduced versus paying?
I think there's only a couple of free students, because you remember under Joan's plan that she brought to the board, we provide discretionary busing already for the pockets of really high need families, and so almost entirely these are paid students. Of the 415, I think 413 are paid students.
Okay, so yeah, I attended Joan's committee meeting, and there was some question about, they thought all of the students that were riding the discretionary buses were being called pay-to-ride students, but you're saying that only really the ones that are paying are being called pay-to-ride, and the ones on the low socioeconomic routes are being called something else.
Yeah, we can play with those word gymnastics. I guess they're all technically pay to ride, but we've identified under the plan that the board approved those areas of discretionary busing that we continued on in that form. And we don't require those parents to fill out pay to ride forms in order to get on the bus if you're in those areas. And so it acts and feels a little differently than the whole pay-to-ride piece.
I think where that came from, Lori, like in the beginning when we were looking at Alexander, and they were just thinking about models, they thought about pay-to-ride may be applicable where you just, it might be like $20 and you could fund it some way. And so I think it maybe came from that, but in the end it wasn't pay-to-ride, it's discretionary busing.
Yeah, I must have misunderstood. I thought they said that they had to go to the communities and have all the parents fill out the forms, but perhaps I know they had to sign up, but there must have been some other process for that. So.
Right.
Okay. So we've got approximately 415 kids that are paying $500 or whatever it is.
Correct.
You know,
I'd just like to say the Herculean task of putting together Pay to Ride in a short amount of time and making it happen is really monumental. And Esme and yourself, Craig, really appreciate it.
I work with good people.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
And if you have concerns about the roads, the gentleman to your left can probably help you with that. On so you feel the para...
Don't turn around.
Yeah, the city council, yeah, you let him know. He's got two hats. The paras, do we feel we have adequate para coverage and everything, or are we still having some issues with that?
Well, we specifically talked about that this week in our meeting. We believe that that's really actually going pretty smoothly. We had a bit of a bump in the beginning of the year when we missed a training date, and we didn't get some of our paras that normally monitor our buses that retraining, especially for wheelchair application and restraint. And so we talked about how to fix that problem next year so we won't encounter it. And it's all about problem solving and preventing it from happening again. We provided a subsequent training date for them. They've now been trained, and people are up to speed and off and running.
Yeah, because I heard from one principal that they were having to do para coverage.
Yes.
And everything like that, and they kind of attributed to the fact that the para training was spaced out a little bit more than might have been desirable. Are we still experiencing a lot of turnover in the paras?
We do.
Okay.
I don't know the exact percentage, and maybe Jane can help with this, but we talked about numbers even reaching upwards of 50% in some cases where folks chose not to return this year that we had on board last year. And one of the things that we discussed was providing this refresher training at the end of the school year, but with the amount of turnover we have, we're still going to have quite a few of our staff members that we're going to have to reintroduce to these topics as we step back into another school year. So it looks to me like we're going to try and develop that training schedule again at the beginning of the school year, only structure it differently so we can get it done.
Sure. Excellent. And on the 15% capacity on spares or reserve, is that something we need to maybe rethink having a few more, or especially if we get into the business of activity buses with some of the, that might run into the same type of issues with that time crunch type of a deal?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we can certainly revisit that. I know that the fall is a real pressure point for us. The winter months won't be quite as bad, and then when we get to next spring and the track season, that'll be a mess. And so we need to talk about how we plan for next spring and what that looks like, and we did cover that in the meeting yesterday as well. Yep.
I already asked these questions, but just so you can have them out there for the public. In talks with some Cedar Springs residents, they were curious if there was still bus space available and they could still sign up for Pay to Ride. Also, they threw out the option that they would just prefer a morning route if possible, or option. So I know we had already talked this, but just so everyone else can hear the answer.
Right, exactly. Parents can still apply for Pay to Ride, but as I've noted, we do not currently have capacity on those North Liberty buses, many of them from where those parents would like to go from. As far as a one-way, that becomes very problematic with our drivers knowing who's riding, how are those children going to get back home, and the responsibility for that. It's, to answer your question, yes, they can apply, but right now we simply don't have that capacity, but that doesn't mean that we won't in the future. That's why we maintain the waiting list.
Well, if you apply on time next year, you can get built into the
Oh,
schedule.
absolutely. You know, next year, if you apply within the window, we'll try and get that all scheduled out, and we were able to be very successful at that scheduling this year. Parents just need to be help us out and be a little bit ahead of the game.
right, anything else on that?
Kind of following up on Phil's question about the paras, it seems like there's also paras, and maybe more than just paras, maybe teachers too, that have to be out there sort of organizing the kids in the morning before the doors open, basically. And I was watching over at Van Allen one morning last week, and it just seemed like, and it wasn't such a bad, I mean, it was inconvenient, but it was maybe not outside the realm of the possible. But you could tell that one of the reasons it had kind of gotten a little better is because some people were learning to show up a little bit earlier. And so that was sort of spreading out the amount of time that people had to be out there watching those kids. And I wonder if at some point are we asking them to do more than we're actually paying them to do, or do we need more paras to handle any of that?
Yeah, we always are looking at, I mean, there's always a push-pull on resources, right? I know in Cabinet this morning, Amy brought up a great example of do we have enough para assistants, and what happens when one of our regular paras is gone, and who subs for that? Is it the principal that has to step in, or are we able to provide subs? And so we talked about some solutions in that. We're constantly monitoring that and working with those types of issues, and it's all about the demands on resource allocation. So,
I had the same thought that you had when I was over there, which is, when it's snowing, I'm not sure I want to see this, because there were a number of walkers, and a good number of walkers, it seemed.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, once it gets cold, if you're just going to have that many more cars, and not to mention the snow is going to mess things up. Is there any idea what we're going to do if it really gets chaotic and starts causing basically tardiness, right? I mean, that's one of the issues.
Yeah, well, our building principals over there met with the North Liberty city leadership in a series of meetings, and they really worked out a very good plan. I feel like they have a high degree of comfort with how they're managing their parent and parent drop-off. The roads, and the city's on board with what they can do for us. And so we just continue to work within the, it's a busy area, and it continues to grow, and some of those growing pains are felt in the way we need to be patient picking up and dropping off our kids.
I would just add, I feel like they've done a really good job, like Craig was alluding to, just constantly trying to problem solve and then be out ahead with communication. For example, Christy Hefner at Penn is actually backed up their parent drop-off time starting as early as 7:30, and so they've got classified staff there beginning at 7:30. Our certified staff comes on board at 7:40. Another example there is that she's working with the city of North Liberty to figure out if they can potentially have car line on the north side of the building as well. So I think they continue to meet. I know that they're actually meeting again tomorrow to kind of work together on what's been working for buildings. I think consistently we hear from all of our principals up in the North Corridor at the elementary level that with dismissal time, they're able to dismiss between 500 and 620 kids anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes. So it's pretty amazing what we're able to do with that just congested area. Eric Ewald, our new principal at Van Allen, has a unique perspective in that last year his own child was attending North Bend Elementary there in North Liberty, and his experience at Van Allen is similar to what he experienced as a parent with drop-off there. It's just our roads, we don't have that capacity right now to really handle that traffic flow that we've seen increase over the years because of the expansion with our enrollment and people moving there. So anyway, they're constantly working together with the city as well as each other.
All right, I think we still got quite a few agenda items tonight, so I think the next one was air conditioning, Matt and Amy.
No, I think that one went to me.
All right, Tony.
If you're okay with it, Craig.
Go for it.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we've done quite well, actually, in the district. We have 2,750,000 square feet, and of that, 77% is air conditioned. And doesn't sound like, we still have a ways to go, but in fact, that's only 8 buildings in the district that have less than 100%. And that includes both high schools, City and West, Southeast Junior High, and only 4 elementary schools. It's a Longfellow, Maine, Lincoln, and, well, I guess Trek is not an elementary school, that's a high school. So we're doing pretty well. And Longfellow, of course, we're going to talk about again in just a few minutes, and that will be taken care of.
And
Yes.
Dwayne, just in the last 3 years, can you list the ones that we've added air conditioning to?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we've done Penn, we've done, of course, Alexander, we've added Hoover, we did Twain, we did Hills, we did Coralville Central, schools, and some at City High, third floor.
Thank you.
So we've done quite a few. Yeah, no problem.
Sounds like historic progress.
We've done well, and I take this opportunity to tell you about an energy award the district received this week. And if you hadn't heard, the American Institute of Architects has a program, and the utility companies in the upper Midwest, which is Mid-American, Alliant, Dakota Energy, and maybe one other one, so it's the whole upper Midwest, they rate schools that have reduction in energy savings or in energy costs. We actually ended up number 3 and number 7 out of 10 in the entire Midwest. Number 3 was Alexander with about 66% savings in projected cost. And number 7 will probably surprise you, but it was Penn, and Penn was in the high 50s. So those 2 schools received awards this week for the design work and the energy savings. So that's a feel-good story for the district, and proud to be part of that. And we also got nice rebate checks. Those of you who've been around a while have seen those. So it's a good program. The other feel-good story, Craig said throw a feel-good story in there. The goats were a feel-good story. You know, sorry, Craig. You know, we did 3 things with the goats. One, we reclaimed playground at Penn. And if you haven't been by to see it, it's looking pretty good with the help of the grounds crew after the goats were done. We actually reclaimed playground and added to their green space, and that is a very positive thing. At Shimmick, the goal was not so much to reclaim playground as to push the forest back. You know, over the years, it kind of creeps in on your playground and takes over if you don't take care of it. So that's what the goats did for us there, besides having a baby goat for educational reasons. Went over real well at Shimmick. And then the third one was Trek. And the purpose there was to clean it up. It had been neglected for years, and you can actually see the park structures that were built in that particular area. So that was a feel-good story for the year, in addition to the energy awards. And just today, the swings went up at Coralville, and I guess the kids were 6 deep, according to Andy, waiting to get on the swings. So it was real popular. The swings went up today at Twain. And we put new playgrounds this year at Wood, Horn, and Kirkwood. We're planning Shimmick and a couple others for next year. So the playground replacements policy that we put in place this spring has really taken effect, and I think that's been a real positive story. The Lucas, Weber, Liberty, Hoover East are all under construction. All good stories.
Dwayne, one of the things we got asked about a lot, of course, the last couple of weeks was the early closures, and it seems to me that the early closures are being driven by basically a small handful of rooms that are hot.
Yes.
Hot, very hot. And so one of the things people are asking is, isn't there some way that we could do something to ventilate those rooms at night more than we do? I know you can't just leave the windows wide open, but would there be any, even in the best case scenario, we're going to have a couple more years before everything's air conditioned. And so hopefully we're done with those for this year, based on what it looks like outside now.
Yeah.
But is there anything more that you can do to cool off those rooms?
Well, we've tried. At Lincoln, we put some hallway corridor fans to circulate air through the entire building. That seems to help. We've also done that at Trek. With Lincoln and Mann, or not Lincoln yet, with Mann and Longfellow, they're massive buildings, 3 stories. Mann has quite a few window air conditioners. We're tapped out with the electrical over there. Without improving that, we can't really add any more. Longfellow, same thing. We've added over there, and so the service is pretty well used up, and they're about 45% air conditioned now, but those buildings are coming up quick. Lincoln and Mann will be coming up as a couple of the first buildings in the facility master plan once the bond is passed. So I think we're in pretty good shape. The one Weston City, we're starting those processes, soon. So they're the older kids. I really think the priority is with the young ones, and that's what we're trying to get accomplished. But those are the schools, the older buildings, that are driving the closures. And it's because they don't have the infrastructure to support a full geothermal or air conditioning system.
How about just sort of like a short-term ventilation, to bring that night air inside?
You still need electrical power to do it.
Yeah.
And we've had in-house discussions, years, in a previous life, I used to teach passive solar classes, and we talked about how to get heat out of buildings. And when you have a building with mass, the theory is it will release the heat later in the day. It's a thermal flywheel effect. And so we're encouraging the custodians in those buildings to leave the windows open at night, because when the temperature drops there around the mass will release the heat. So if you leave it closed up all night, you start in the morning, it's already hot, the mass is already warm, there's no way you're going to cool it down. So the secret is to let the heat release itself overnight. The problem we're having is a lot of these older buildings need screens, and there's bugs, and there's bees, and bats that can get in. So it's a balancing act where we can do that.
So, just one more thing. So Dwayne, in 2013, it was a very hot start to the year.
Yes.
And I remember reading and hearing about at Dubuque community schools that they were they were bringing in portable air conditioning units that were temporary for the first couple of weeks of school. And
right.
Two of the reasons that I remember when we discussed it at that time that we had not utilized that was A, the energy infrastructure, the power, the load that was necessary in some of our older buildings, and secondly, B, the sheer number of classrooms that we would have to. So I'm just wondering if there's a point in time where as we get if we're at 77% now, when we get to a certain threshold where it actually might be a reasonable possibility for the first couple of weeks of school in future years. Probably not so much at the end of May, but certainly at the end of August. I'm wondering if there's a possibility to plan ahead to have, when we get down to 1 or 2 buildings, is that a possibility?
Yeah, I looked into those portable air conditioning units, and one of the issues related to them is that we have such high humidity here. They work really well in Colorado and places like that, but they don't work so well here because you have to remove the humidity as well, and it's almost better just to dehumidify the room. So we've tried that, but again, you have to have some way to exhaust it out the building. So that portable air conditioner doesn't do any good unless you can vent the stale or the high humidity air to the outdoors. So it's not as simple as it sounds. It's certainly doable, but again, the primary reason for not doing it is not having the power supply to do it with. So, but we can certainly look into it.
All right, thanks, Dwayne, for historic improvement there, and we actually have a plan to get it done, so that's the impressive part too. So.
Yeah,
a few years from now will be non-issue.
One quick question. On the 23% that's not air conditioned, I was told by a building principal that if it would be possible for the grounds crew not to be mowing around it. It's an elementary school. If the schedule could be altered due to the fact that, they are opened up and the noise is not conducive to a good educational environment, that type of thing.
We talked about that in-house. We got your request, and it doesn't take that many minutes to mow around the building, but they're very sensitive to those buildings, and they'll do the perimeters and not mow up next to the building unless it's early in the morning or late in the afternoon.
Sure.
So, yeah, we're trying to adjust those schedules.
Perfect. It's just a customer service type thing.
Yeah,
That, if we can meet those requirements to help those schools as well, that's great. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, thanks, Dwayne. Next item on the agenda, teaching and learning, is the ACT annual report. Matt?
Sure, thanks. I think this is a exciting one to talk about for our district. It should be a source of pride for us. Our ACT results in 601 students took the ACT assessment from our high schools. Composite of the 25.4, state composite 22.1, so almost 3 points above that state composite score. So definitely a source of pride for our high school students, and some well-deserved recognition for those students that participated in that assessment and took it. So you have the results there in front of you with the different breakdowns between English, math, reading, and science, and then the composite scores. One perfect score this year. Usually we have a few of those, but we got one in this year, but a very good overall composite score for our 600 students.
What was and this is juniors and seniors taking it, right?
Not necessarily. It can be
Sophomore,
high school.
so-
Yep.
okay.
Some students take it early.
Do we have a breakdown on as far as sophomores, juniors, seniors?
I don't have that in this report. If that's something the board's interested in, I can work
I
to
know
get
when
that
this
breakdown.
I know when this came out, the superintendent was interested in increasing the numbers of participation. Since ACT is based in Iowa City, have we ever thought of encouraging them to help us maybe test every single student that graduate, every senior, just to get a number of what, of the product coming out?
Yeah, I think the challenge is there. We have some students that decide to take a test that's more relevant for what they decide to do. If a student's going to continue on to Kirkwood Community College, oftentimes they spend time preparing for the Compass assessment, and to do that. So there's a financial cost that goes along with that ACT. So we would just need to explore those options,
Right,
Director
and-
Hemingway, and
And
work out.
And I
Yeah.
understand the expense, and that's why I'm saying, well,
Yep.
they're a hometown business. Is it the type of thing we can do? We might be unique in the fact if we were to do it, we'd be the only town in the country that every student took the ACT.
We are.
And as far as the scores or people not taking the ACT and going that Kirkwood route, we've gotten some scary results and statistics of the success of some of those students going to Kirkwood, and it's not very good. And it's something that we need to address, and maybe if we had them all take a similar test, it might give us better clues on how to correct it going forward.
Well, I think you'll see some more pieces coming from, if you've followed the legislation on the CTE reform and some of the college readiness work that is coming from Des Moines, and some of the things we'll be asked to do to talk about college and career readiness and what those assessments look like. But I certainly understand your point about ACT being a local partner and continuing to look for ways that we can increase the amount of students taking that assessment. We do have fee waivers we try to help our students with in the guidance office if that's a consideration. So we really try to work through any of those barriers. But yeah, we can continue to explore those efforts to increase that.
You encourage students to take it more than once too. I mean, it's as far as, unless they ace it, there's no need to. But, you're not penalized for taking it more than once, so you always get the higher score, correct?
Get the best score.
I did want to just add real quick, and I haven't been able to talk to Matt and Amy. We are talking to ACT about the direct question that you discussed as far as trying to work in from a low-income or struggling learner standpoint, younger grades as far as, looking at if ACT being a hometown type of business can help us and provide funding for them doing that. Again, I haven't had an opportunity to talk to Matt and Amy about it because the meeting just literally happened last week, and I'm actually working on the email tonight, but that is happening, and so I think it's directly related to your concern.
Excellent. Well, I think especially with students that haven't, over time, haven't historically done well on it, we need to encourage that sophomore, junior, senior taking of it, because there's no penalty for that. The only thing is the financial burden that's placed on them, so.
Is it approximately $60 per test for each student to take the test? Do you know?
I think it's closer to 75 or 80.
Okay.
No.
It's a little hard to know what to make of some of the graphs because, of course, not everybody takes the ACT, and some districts might push it more than other districts do. And it's not, I assume, and it can't be probably broken down in terms of the categories that are sort of our special concerns in our strategic plan. But I did notice, the figure 2 there, the one place where the bar for Iowa City is lower than the bar for the state is where students who have taken less than 3 years of math. And I just wondered if you had any theories about why that one place, is there something we could do? Would sort of be a targeted intervention, it might be an opportunity, in other words, to actually.
I think the biggest thing we could do is move students out of that bar altogether. Less than 3 years of
advocate
math is
4
just
years.
not a good solution. So
But
taking the
you're
ACT
still
and not
gonna
having
get
take, and I would say the other thing about that for our demographic, Director Liebig, would be that's probably younger students taking the assessment, so they haven't quite had 3 years of math yet. So students that may be scoring in that category just maybe haven't completed as many courses in their math sequence yet. But if it's juniors and seniors that are reporting less than 3 years, for some reason we haven't done what we needed to do to get them through that sequence, whether they haven't been successful the first time through or whether they just haven't taken that course yet. But, I think taking less than 3 years, we just don't want students in that category altogether. So my guess would be it's students not having taken that sequence yet.
I mean,
Less than
it is, they're being compared to students elsewhere who have taken less than 3 years, so even if you were to move them, you kind of wonder, I don't even know what it might be. It might be something about math that we're doing, it might be something about who's taking it and who's not taking it, or who's taking more than 3 years and who's not, but it was enough to make you wonder if that is some kind of opportunity that, where we're kind of falling behind more than, in other places we're ahead on every single bar graph, compared to the state. I don't know.
Is there any way to do two? To do one that's just juniors and seniors and one everyone?
I'm not sure if we can get a score report that way, but I can certainly look into that and see.
Bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good thing that our younger students feel comfortable and confident enough to say, I'm willing to take this chance, this opportunity to go ahead and take it. So I don't look at this as a negative thing. I think if we can, for the purposes of showing that, obviously if you look at our other scores in comparison, and if we know that we have younger students, it kind of speaks for why that number would be that way, but.
Well, this is why we have a strategic plan to improve reading and math proficiency, right? And if we do a good job there, all the students will benefit in all academic areas. But Matt, I just want to say congratulations. A 25.4 is outstanding. The fact that over 600 students for the first time, or at least in the first time in the last 5 years, I assume it's the first time ever, but, and your enrollment was actually, or people taking the test was like a 5% increase over the previous record. So, that was a pretty breakthrough result. So if we can keep that up, that'd be outstanding. Further discussion on this one? Looks like a great result. All right, next,
Thanks.
moving into operational work.
Yep. Thank
is
you.
the Longfellow Elementary renovation.
Yep.
Dwayne?
Thank you. We're excited. We're bringing you a really nice plan for Longfellow this evening. It's we have 2 projects left to do in our SAVE program, and Longfellow is one of those 2. The other is West, and we're going to bring you West next month. But for Longfellow, the budget, the overall budget is $11.7 million, and we're trying to keep the construction cost in the $9 million range. And we're based on our estimates so far, we're doing a pretty good job of keeping it there. Some of the things I might mention is before we bring Chris up here and the architects is that this building was built in 1917, and I think this design that you're going to see is really sensitive to the historical importance of the building. I think they've done a good job of that. You're going to see a new gymnasium, a new media center, art and music rooms, and some additional classrooms. The site's going to change. The staff's aware of it. The staff has seen the plans. They're excited. And I'll just slow down there and bring up Chris Plasaric, our principal, and he's got a few words he'd like to say.
Good evening. I want to first, on behalf of myself and the Longfellow community, I want to thank the board and the greater community for this opportunity. We are extremely excited about this at our school. For those of you that don't know me personally, I started teaching here in the district. I started teaching at Longfellow in 1999, and we've been closely affiliated with that community ever since. And so it's a place that's pretty near and dear to my heart. And so to see so much coming to this community and to our school is somewhat overwhelming, and I would say it's probably like being about 10 years old and having every holiday on the same day when we got to have this discussion about the plans for our building. So I couldn't be happier about this. I think it really, when people take a look at the new projects around the district and they take a look at what we're able to do at the building from 1917, I think it just puts an exclamation point on the bond next fall and the importance of the master plan that we've got put together. So thank you to the board and to our administration and community for this opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. And we also had some staff members earlier, but I know the art teacher's still here. Have we got anybody else? Just you? So thanks for coming. The architectural firm is a joint venture between BCDM, which is a firm that I've done many projects with. They're out of Omaha, and they have 2 specialties. One is churches and the other is schools, and they do really nice work on both. I've seen them and build them. And they're doing a joint venture with Rohrback and Associates, a local architect firm here in Iowa City, and I think it's been working out pretty famously so far. And at the podium is Greg Stiernan, and he's one of the lead architects from BCDM. And I'll let you introduce your compadres back here and take it from there.
All right. Thank you, Dwayne.
As Dwayne said, my name is Greg Sterin with BCDM Architects. I've also got Roger Flores with BCDM and Will Downing with Rohrbach and Associates sitting back there. So I'd just like to take you through the project real quick here, kind of start on a overall scope and get a little bit more into it. So as we're looking at the site plan here, north is to the right. So the existing school is right here, kind of shown in gray. We're doing a gymnasium, classroom addition to the west. There's an existing parking lot that will be kind of taking over with that addition, as well as a drop-off lane. So to kind of try to alleviate some of the congestion on pickup and drop-off on the street, having a drop-off lane the buses can turn around in, as well as providing for fire truck access around the school. In doing that, we displaced the existing parking lot and we'll be providing for staff parking on the east side of the site. Also providing a significant amount of landscape buffering for the surrounding community, seeing as the historical nature of this neighborhood. As Dwayne mentioned earlier, this is one of the schools that is not fully air conditioned. The play field will become the location of the well field for the heat pump system for upgrading the mechanical system for the entire school. Also, one other thing, the addition of this parking lot, we'll need to relocate and provide some newer playground equipment as well.
So I might add that the Longfellow Playground is part of our playground replacement cycle, and so we've scheduled it so that the second summer of construction we'll be able to put a new playground on that site.
From a floor plan standpoint, this is a three-story building. Part of the project, we are providing a new gymnasium that's larger than the current multi-purpose room. That will also double up as our storm shelter for the building, as well as let the multi-purpose room be truly a cafeteria space, and also open up the stage that has been converted into offices over time off of that multi-purpose room. With this being a three-story building, there's not ADA access currently for all of the floors, so we would be providing a new elevator kind of in the middle of the circulation of the building. The ground level is actually kind of a split level that's 3 feet difference, so there's really 4 levels that we'll be providing access to with the elevator. Part of this project is also relocating the admin offices and providing a secured entrance to the building adjacent to the new gymnasium. This provides one clear point of entry to the building that visitors will need to go through, sign in before they're allowed access to the building. Currently, it's kind of a split level approach that you can either go up or down and never really have to check in. This also will allow for nighttime events in the gymnasium where we can lock off the rest of the building from usage of that. We're also, as part of the addition, providing a new media center adjacent to the entry, and on the second floor, art, music, and computer lab space. This allows us to open up the existing building to which currently houses the computer lab, art and music, to easier flowing corridors, which currently there's a confusing circulation pattern, and opening up to larger general use classrooms. Right now their existing classrooms are pretty undersized for what we would typically see at an elementary school level. We are also providing for 3 more general use classrooms in this current phase, and able to provide structure so that in the future we could, on the 3rd level, provide an addition that would provide 3 additional classrooms for any future growth, due to the fact that it's a relatively tight site. in the portion of the site where we're doing the building. There's a large play field, but where there's actual buildable space is very tight. So in providing for a future third-story addition, that helps a very landlocked situation. Moving on to the elevations. As Dwayne mentioned earlier, this is we're in a historical district here, so we're trying to be very cognizant to the historical original 1917 building facade. So the original building is very traditional on the original east elevation. The main street access is the south elevation. So our new addition would be using the same brick precast concrete materials, as well as mimicking the same kind of historic double hung window classroom areas. Part of this is also trying to create one very visible front entry to the building, which is also the secured entrance.
Just a quick question on that. Sorry, on that south elevation. Yeah. So is that the part you're talking about where you could build over the top? Is over?
Yes. So a third story would go potentially right here in the future, and mimic the look of the lower two levels, and be in the same scale as the existing building adjacent.
Now, on your turnaround, and I'm just trying to picture when I go sledding, but where you have the bus turn, that's still up, yeah. Okay.
Yep, our hill, we go downhill pretty significantly, right in here.
Yeah, so
yep.
how are you, I guess it looks to me like that's getting pretty close to where it really takes off.
We're really borderline with right where that is. We're still working a little bit on can we get that a little bit closer to the building and do as little grading as possible in that area. So trying to maintain that existing slope.
And your main secure drop or entrance is there,
Correct.
but it appears you're probably going to have.
We would have a service entrance here to provide for deliveries to the kitchen. Mm-hmm.
But that's going to be, that's supposed to be the main traffic flow
Correct.
going in and out of the building.
I think one of the nice features too is that along the west property line, and right there where it kind of comes back to the east, or the north end of that line right there, there's some really nice mature trees there, and we're able to protect all those with this, so we're not going to be damaging any trees. We hope, because they're just beautiful. Couple things. I don't know if you mentioned them, Greg, but we're going to try our best to make that gymnasium a hardened shell, so it can serve as a storm shelter.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got that worked in our budget too to do that. So I think
Isn't that a requirement of the city anyway?
the city requirement as it is today is that all new structures must have one.
So this is a renovation, so we get by?
So the renovations you don't, but we're going to try and do it anyway. And we're looking at doing it at West High as well. And of course, we're building a hardened shelter at Hoover East right now. So
this is your main secure entrance? This
Correct.
last area?
Mm-hmm.
that'll be a secure entrance that will force visitors during the day to go through the office, just like the other setups. I think it'll be pretty nice.
So maybe you said this, but the space has increased by like 60%.
The original square footage is approximately 35,000. Our addition is just over 20, so it puts us in the 56,000 square foot
The index
range.
is 162. Yeah.
But does that change the capacity then of the building?
It does.
Because it looked in the plan that the capacity
It
wasn't going
was
to
not in the
change.
plan. This is kind of a bonus because we were able to repurpose the media center and the 2 classrooms that were there and add a computer lab. We were looking at add additional capacity, almost 100 students here.
Oh, way to go. That's good.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I'd always heard about Longfellow was that the rooms themselves were smaller than average. And
Right.
so even if you had a median class size in there, it felt more crowded. Is that going to be different under?
Yes. So as part of taking the media center, art and music into the new addition, we're able to repurpose those spaces. And right now the corridor is kind of split up and very confusing. We're able to completely rework all of that to have a lot cleaner corridor system, move those classroom walls out a bit and enlarge those. So we take, they're still not as large as maybe a brand new school with the space restrictions, but we're going from about 700 square feet in some of them up to 750 to 800 in that range.
There are bearing walls too that limit what they can do, so. But I think probably the biggest plus is converting that media center back into 2 classrooms and cleaning up the corridors, because right now they've kind of encroached on the corridors with different purposes, an IT room, things like that are going to go away. It'll really, I think the inside of this building will be fantastic. And one thing I've had experience with in the past and with these architects is when we redo those windows, when they go in, it literally brings that building back to life, because it's kind of dull and dingy, but I guarantee you, when you see those windows go in, it just wakes it all up. It's a pretty nice touch, so. And they're historically correct.
So Dwight, I was going to ask about expansion. Maybe it's not applicable because you've built it in via the design. Would it be expandable, or?
Is this building expandable? Yeah. The intent is the structure, the hardened shelter for the gymnasium. We have the potential for adding classrooms on top of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on the 3rd floor.
Oh, yeah, because it doesn't go quite as high as the rest of the building.
So actually, it would be, on the 3rd level, we would be able to do a future addition over the art, music, and computer lab here.
Brilliant.
Which would include space for 3 classrooms, a couple of offices, and more lockers in the corridors.
So this, you have the potential to tie this in over here.
It would actually be not over the gymnasium, but over the art and music and computer lab, so on the south elevation.
Oh, in the front?
That's my mistake, yeah. It's over the art.
That 2-story volume on the left would become 3 and have a similar window patterning.
There's another nice feature. There's another stairwell on the north side. It's that second drawing down on the left there, Bill, as you're looking at it. That accesses all 3 floors, and it gets rid of some dead-end corridors, and another access out to the playground. It makes the building safer.
Well, I just gotta say, it's beautiful. I mean, it's, if it looks like that when we build it, and it will.
Yeah.
But man, that's really good.
We're excited, and poor Chris, I made him bite his tongue all summer while we were designing this, and he wanted to just scream at the world and tell him how great his building's going to be, but we turned him loose here a couple weeks ago.
I definitely kept it historic.
Exactly. You maintain the historic feel that fits with the neighborhood. It's a 100-year-old building, right? You maintain the historic feel, but you have new portions that kind of like the additions at Coralville Central over the years, where it looks, it maintains the feel, but it still feels new.
I've done a lot of 100-year-old buildings. I've done some that are 120, and they have good bones. The structure's good.
Sure.
And if you use that to your advantage, there's no reason why you have to tear them down. A structure like this is absolutely gorgeous, and when they're done, it's going to look better.
This is such a commitment to one of our historic neighborhoods. This is a great thing. This is really impressive.
Thank you.
The timeline, too, I might add, is that next spring we'll vacate the building. Within a couple days after school, we'll start asbestos abatement. The students, the staff will all be moved to the new Hoover East next fall.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the first class that's going out there. So we'll have 2 summers and 1 school year to renovate this building, which is a safe way to do a building like this. It's just the 3-story, the nature of the renovation and the additions just makes it almost impossible to put students in there. So actually that Hoover East is going to serve a real purpose to help us make Longfellow a better school.
All right, is there anything else you want to share tonight?
Unless you have any other questions,
Yeah, if there's any other questions.
Just one quick one. With it being a 100-year structure and not originally being designed for geothermal, you don't see any challenges or problems going that way forward?
No, we've used this system in a lot of renovations of this type, and this school actually, this kind of vintage has a higher floor-to-floor
Sure.
height than a lot of them do, so that
Which
actually
is a good
ends up,
thing. And
yep,
the
that ends
new
up helping
additions,
us.
Are they going to mock that as well, or maintain it, or are you going to shorten it up?
Because of the 3-foot difference in floor heights on the ground level, we'll have a little bit tighter floor-to-floor in the addition on the second level, but we'll have a slight ramp up to minimize that difference.
The heating units inside the rooms will be similar to what you just saw at Coralville Central and at Penn, at Twain, same type of unit. That's how you put geothermal heating cooling units in an older building.
Great, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Dwayne, if people want to see this design, where's the best place to?
Yeah, can you
Are
put
we
this
able to
on the
get
web?
on the-
I mean, can't this PowerPoint be put on the website?
Typically we don't put the floor plans, but I don't think I have too much of an issue with these. We can,
Can we do the exterior at least?
oh yes, sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea, just,
Yeah.
if you want to just do the
And
exterior.
I think
but-
we'll leave these here in the lobby too. If somebody wants to stop by, they're welcome to look at them.
What we've done in the past is had them in multiple locations, right? Had the drawings here and at the school, and, ones we can take around with us if people are interested.
Yeah, I should add too that Chris and the architects and I showed this to the PTO as well, and I think we had a really positive reaction from them too, so it's been well received. But
All right, well, thank you very much.
Chris,
That was
one
exciting.
thing before you move on, Chris. Dwayne, I know it's a different building, but just thinking down the road, would this be something that Horseman parents could look at and kind of imagine something
Yeah.
not necessarily similar, but it would be the same?
Well, I've thought a lot about Man, and obviously it's a really restricted site.
Yeah.
And I honestly think the time I've spent out there looking at it, what my brain tells me is that we need to take the old gymnasium off the building. So that would be the west side of the building, is actually remove part of the building in order to make it better. If that makes sense to you. Because there's different floor levels there, and I think if we remove part of that older part, we can actually go up the side of the building with a nice addition. So it won't be the same,
Right.
but it'll be similar.
Well, the other thing at Man too is to talk to the guy in front of you about getting that park over to the
Yeah,
side.
well, we've had those discussions.
All right, thank you very much, Dwayne.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda is to approve the request for allowable growth from the SBRC for special education. I entertain a motion. There's a very specific motion in the packet.
I move that we recommend approval of the following resolution. The Board of Directors of the Iowa City Community School District approves the request for allowable growth and supplemental state aid payment for a negative special education balance for the school year 2015-16. The final amount of the special education balance and the amount of the supplemental aid will be determined by the Department of Education after all special education balances have been finalized.
Second.
And just so everybody knows, this is really an annual event. We do this every year. It helps us cover our costs for special education. And of course, legally, we're required to provide special education, but we also do a lot of things for our students that, and this is our community's told us we value special education, and therefore financially we run a deficit, and this is how we make up the deficit. So any further discussion on it?
Well, it's also something we should discuss when we get a hold of Grant Wood AEA, because there's some concerns with weighting and that could be avoided.
Further discussion?
I will point out to you that both in our third and fourth quarterly reports to the board last spring, we projected a special ed deficit of $5.5 million. And so we were pretty much right on target with that. Kind of the variable that we don't know is high-cost funds, Medicaid funds, and tuition in and out students. So those we take based upon last year's numbers and roll forward, but we were pretty close as how we projected that.
All right, further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I'm just going to tell you I'm voting yes.
You registered.
Okay, all right.
All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next item is a similar request for our limited English program. I'd entertain a motion.
All right, I move we recommend approval of the following resolution. The Board of Directors of the Iowa City Community School District approve the request for modified supplemental amounts for excess LEP costs for the 2015 school year in the amount of $1,168,545.36.
Second.
Discussion? Leslie's right down to the penny, so perfect. All right, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thanks, Kim. Next item on the agenda is Appendix 9, Dwayne.
Thank you. We have 7 projects and 9 actions requested for approval. The first one is award of contract for the Van Allen Liberty High School practice softball field, and unfortunately, this bid, we only got one bid. It came in at $397,000. Our budget was $250,000, and I'm going to recommend that we reject that bid and then look at redoing this next spring and maybe getting more interested bidders. Number one, I think that will help the price, but this is just too much to swallow it. So that'd be my recommendation, is to actually reject that bid. Step 8 on the City High Telecom room, the district requested some changes to the data equipment, and we had a little unforeseen demolition, so there's a change request for $2,209. And then we had a project at Shimmick, which was controlling the air conditioning controls in that building because it was hard to regulate. That project's done, so we're requesting the Step 9 substantial completion, which is release the retainage, and then Step 10, which is acceptance of the project. There's no punch list or any outstanding items there. At Liberty, we have a change request for $187,000. It might be an opportune time to tell you that the total change request there would now be $1,445,000. And then we have a little over $2.2 million available, so we still have some budget left to use at our discretion. So I have seen it slow down out there. They're more into the finishes now. They're actually starting terrazzo next week in part of the building, so that's how far along they are. So a lot of those changes have been dealt with. But there's unforeseen changes in the handrail staircase details. We requested the locker bases be changed to concrete from wood. I just think that was a long-term investment for the district. It made sense. We changed some hardware. We added a vapor barrier in the gym floor. Floor that big, you hate to take a risk to have that moisture coming through the floor and having an adverse effect on the wood. So there is a heavy-duty plastic vapor barrier, but we actually added an additive to the concrete to improve that. There were some code changes out there. We had to change some venting and wall modifications and make the elevator shaft a little bit more fire-rated. That's that one. There's another change request at Liberty, and that was for the kitchen equipment. And actually, that's a correction of $1,800 that we made an error in last time, so it's just a correction, that's all that is. And at Longfellow, we'd like you to approve the schematic design, and I'm hopeful that you'll do that. It's a beautiful building. And we also had a project at West High, the main floor restroom remodel. We did some additional, we replaced some broken concrete, and we did some ADA code changes for $2,000. And then we have the roof management program, which is roofs that we're doing at Coralville Central, City High, Hills, Lincoln, and Longfellow. And that request is for $34,406, and there's just a lot of unforeseen little changes in flashing and things like that you run into. So with that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
Is the roof tight at West High now? After that, in the area of West High where we had the roof blow up, do we have that under control?
It's been replaced. Yeah, the insurance company picked that up. But there is some brick that was damaged. It actually fractured a mortar joint around that building. That has yet to be finished. But other than that, the roof itself is secure and tightened down and performing fine.
All right, entertain a motion.
I make a motion, we approve the Appendix 9 less the Van Allen practice field.
Well, His recommendation is to deny the
It
bid.
is to reject it.
The recommendation was to reject it, yes.
Reject, well,
It's written that way.
reject the bid or proposal for the Van Allen practice field. Approve the Appendix 9 less the,
No, that,
Which
actually,
appendix
the Appendix 9 recommendation was to reject it. So if you
Okay,
approve,
so the motion is to approve Appendix 9 as read, or as amended.
Second.
Further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Item on the agenda is items withdrawn from consent, number 17.
I was asked by Equity Director Botchway to pull these two items so he'd have an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, so I just didn't know if there's any questions. I know that these are things that we've talked about kind of around equity in the last couple of weeks, and so, I kind of front-loaded it by telling you that it was coming before you, and so now here it is. Again, this is somewhat of the work that's been continuous from how we have looked at the district climate survey results. I know that we still have that task force that's going to meet, but we did want to engage with different partners, especially around the implicit bias that, students that came before the board, as well as you heard from some concerned parents and emails. And so this was a direct response to that, and some of the other comments that have happened from other concerned parents as well. And so I'm really excited about, continuing and doing this training. We will be meeting with the Harvard group this weekend to kick off this kind of, wouldn't necessarily say partnership, but working in tandem with this group, and hopefully a partnership, moving forward to next year where we're, lock in step with a lot of the things that they're doing with the school districts in their area in Boston. And so, again, just really excited about the opportunity. From the implicit bias standpoint, I see now that the restorative justice is up there. And again, as we talk about disproportionality within discipline, this provides our teachers with a greater level of strategies to address some of those concerns and look at it from different models of focus. And so really excited about these two opportunities and would welcome any questions.
Oh, looks outstanding. Thanks for being responsive to I think exactly what we in the community were looking for. So
It's $20,000. Is there any way that this could have been piloted?
Unfortunately not. The person's coming from the University of Illinois and doing some of this work. I don't know if you can tell from the agreement, they were actually asking for a lot more. They were going to do a $70,000 contract with the district for this year one. We really looked at their entire proposal and, for lack of a better word, walked them down from $20,000. One is because, one of the areas that they do use in order to assess restorative justice practices is student voice. We have that in our student climate survey data that the university has been helping us with, and so we felt no need that we needed to continue that particular service. The key piece in there that we really wanted their guidance on was ensuring that they would provide us with the plan, the actual action-based plan or work around the plan, where they would provide that coaching to not only school leaders in the particular buildings and the staff, but also community leaders as well, and so making a very comprehensive approach. But beyond that, they were also going to provide some of that repair work that's necessary for really understanding, the restorative justice practice. And outside of that, we are also going to come back, and this is one of the savings piece, and use the university to, again, help us with the evaluative criteria now and into the future as well from an assessment standpoint. And so I guess that's the best way I can answer your question right now. I mean, it was a higher number, but we wanted to, again, focus on the plan element of it. We do know that from a research-based standpoint, it takes 3 to 5 years to really look at restorative justice practices. But my hope and desire is that as we develop this plan and work in tandem with the university and other community stakeholders, that we wouldn't necessarily have to continue this direction. It's just using their guidance and their success in other areas in the country, and then moving forward once they've developed that plan and helped us with the coaching pieces.
So you will be working with the University of Iowa even though you're working with this group?
Oh, most definitely and directly. And so Dr. Sarah Buck is not here, and she was the individual that provided the information for the public policy project, as well as testing some of the other folks that were associated with it. But they are going to be working with this lockstep with me, including the implicit bias piece that I did not share. That is a reduced rate. It's actually something that was, in the $250,000 to $230,000 range. But we talked with different university partners to provide additional area of coaching. I'm going to also be, coaching and facilitating some of the trainings as well to ensure that we can, again, look at it from a model that we all will be learning from, and then we can continue forward long after they're gone.
Okay, given we've covered both, I think we can entertain a motion to approve.
Well, if we're talking 18 as well, that one, isn't that 60,000 for 3 years?
Correct, and so
That's 180,000?
correct, over 3 years, and so that is a lot more job intensive or job embedded training. And so what that would look like was a kickoff, so to speak, for the 8 schools that we would be focusing on this year, because we couldn't do all schools this year. And so it would be 8 schools this first year, 8 schools the second year, and then 11 schools the third year. This is to ensure that we are providing a coach for each particular school or each particular group within the schools that we can that can work with the groups on the training, the follow-up, obviously the PD development in regards to what that follow-up provides, and then moving forward in the next training. But that's a meeting. That is a training meeting per month all the way through May, and then it changes to a longer schedule beginning in August. We're starting the year somewhat short, but a lot of that is going to be the front loading that needs to happen with Cersei and her team to ensure that we're getting the plan rolling for this year and then for the next couple of years as well.
Fantastic.
Things that when you say, and I totally understand, but if we can't do it all in the first year, I just want to make sure I understand what the rate limiting step is there. I mean, is that because we just can't afford to pay these people to do that, or because there's just not enough PD time in the contract to be able to do that, or?
I didn't hear that. What was the piece you?
What's sort of?
I can jump in.
What is
here
the
a little
piece
bit. I
that
think it's
stops
the
us
time
from
mostly, Chris.
PD
Just
time?
accounting for the time in our PD calendar. I think
That's what I
we
thought.
have just several things we're trying to enter in that calendar, and it's just a matter of being able to get to all those buildings and plan for it. And while we have urgency for it, we also need to make sure it's effective and that what we do actually has an impact. And so I think that's the balance we've tried to create with Kingsley, is that while we do this, we want it to be effective, we want it to be long-term, accounting for all those other pieces that have to get into our PD calendar too.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
that's one thing I'd heard from some concerns is just, with the TLC and all these other things, if there's enough time for staff to really take all this stuff on.
Well, and I think that's where our coaches are going to have to be a little bit flexible. I mean, we're going to have to look at some of the staff times and taking over some of those staff times and kind of moving around, reallocating that time to ensure its importance. And again, just so I'm clear, it is just one meeting per month with the different groups. And so while it is a time concern, as we've kind of talked about from a balance perspective, it is something that I think is feasible enough. And then for the second and third year, I think we can really build it in to the professional development that we're doing, so we don't necessarily have the same concerns.
Fantastic. Well, it is important and crucial that we do it, but we just have to make sure it's effective.
Yep.
Entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve 18 and 17 from the consent agenda.
Second.
Further discussion? Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, next item on the agenda is agenda setting. I think you're going to find the 11th is pretty, got some good topics already. Transportation update is on there. Look at the current draft.
We've had some comment from the community on special ed. Could we have some kind of a special ed update on how we're going that way? And
I think it's on a quarterly basis right now.
okay,
I thought it was increased to monthly. Was it not? Yeah. Because I asked for quarterly, and then Steve came back with that they would increase it to monthly. So maybe we need to make
well, would it
adjustment.
be in order for that first meeting in October to be one where we had a report out?
Is it on the second one? It's
Oh,
on
is
the
that what
second
it
one.
is? It's a placeholder on the second one?
The person that we've hired is the implementation advisor, and we'll have had a second session with her by that time, so then we can give you a more full report.
So we'll add that to the draft of the second meeting in October.
Sure.
Sounds good. Anything else on the 11th? Work session, GeoBond, Facilities Master Plan, Affordable Housing Annual Reviews. I'd like to add a real quick item. I think this will be only a couple minute items, which would be the IASB convention and training. Just do a quick check on who's going where.
Okay.
I think that'd be like a 5-minute or less topic. Do you want to talk
Well,
legal counsel at that one, or do you want?
I was just going to say, do we want to put that on for that one?
Well, we put it on, at least frame the discussion. How about that? Might be time-dependent legal counsel discussion. All right, so
So
let's do it.
FMP, I guess, covers everything we could possibly think to say about the FMP. Like, I'm kind of curious, one of the things I'd like to talk about at some point is whether we need to take another look at our capacity determinations for these buildings, which we kind of know are not exactly accurate given the use of the buildings, but that fall within FMP.
Sure can.
Okay.
It'd be helpful, like you did this time, if we could put the questions on paper, or, you know what I mean? Or, I know Steve and Matt and Amy have been talking about that too, right? What's the real capacity? Okay. We've got superintendent evaluation, planned closed session. We've got a closed session on land acquisition. I think both of those would be quick. I would try to do maybe both before the, could start one at 5:15, one immediately after. If it goes long, we can always table it and come back to it after the meeting, but I propose we try to do that before the next board meeting, if everybody's okay with that. And we'll do a check on how long we think it's gonna take to ahead of that. So if it takes too long, we'll move one to the end, or after the meeting. How about that? And then governance committee.
So, Latasha and Paul, we have, just since neither one of you has been at a P&G meeting, we do have a routine kind of 3-year rotating schedule for all of our policies, appendices, so on and so forth. I have the schedule here. I will forward it to you guys, but basically for the calendar of stuff that we have to get done for this year in reviewing, not counting other things that the board may wish for us to review. We can talk about what we want to pull off that for our first meeting. Kenny?
So your agenda item might be review the 3-year rotation.
Yeah, we'll have it figured out by the end of this week, Kim. Okay.
I'm going to ask you, Brian, so if the board does wish to have you discuss something specific, do we first bring it to the board table and direct you to do that? Is that how that works? Or
The board would refer something to policy and governance.
So it would first appear in a board meeting agenda, okay.
Or it could be work session, but it could be.
Yeah, it could be work session.
Like something I'm sort of throwing around in my head, so not ready.
And sometimes there's other things that administration might bring to the board and say, we need some guidance on this, and then the board would say, well, let's punt it to P&G and have them look at it and bring it back. Let the committees do the work. Do the dirty work. The colons and semicolons and mays and shalls.
All right, just a reminder that immediately following this meeting, we have an exempt meeting. That, and entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.